Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live stream author party. I thought I would get a bunch of people together. We'd hang out it's planned for 3 hours because even when I'm by myself, this goes for almost 3 hours. But now you'll be entertained by people who are not me, which is a good thing. So I am going to let my lovely guests of the moment introduce themselves. I've got Alechia Dow and Rosiee Thor, both YA sci-fi writers. So theme number one is YA sci-fi. And we're just going to jump right in and answer questions and have a fun chat. So, Alechia, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Alechia Dow. I wrote The Sound of Stars, which came out February 25th. Yeah, hi.
Buy it.
Yay. I'm Rosiee Thor, and I wrote Tarnished Are The Stars. It came out back in October. Also sci-fi, please buy it.
Please buy the book.
That's really the theme here, is please buy our books.
All right. And also, I'm new to having this many people on StreamYard, and I might play with the layout once or twice, so don't freak out. Hold on, I'm actually going to push a button just for funsies because we're early. I want to see what this does.
Ooh.
That's cool. What do we like?
Nice. I like this.
Okay, let's do it.
I like it too.
I like it mostly because I'm short in real life, and with me at the bottom, it makes me feel like that's the status quo, and it's good.
Well, plus when we get more people, it'll fit better. Okay, so I'm going to put the first question on the screen. This is about sci-fi novellas. I think it is going to cover your face, Rosiee, and I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Oh, no, it's smaller.
You can still see me.
I'll read out the question. I'm trying to write a sci-fi genre blend novella, including several points of view and different characters. What are some things I should avoid or think about including? And Alechia, Rosiee, I might jump in. Any of us can tackle this one.
So I have a good answer for this because I just watched something about this yesterday. So this is me completely cribbing an answer from someone else, but I will give them credit, I promise. Something to think about with a novella is that you're writing something shorter than a typical novel, right? So you have to think about the story that you're telling and the space that you have to tell it in. So immediately my, not necessarily concern, but the thing that pinged for me is that you're including several points of view. And I would think about that and consider which points of view are really necessary to this novella, because it is going to be a shorter piece of fiction. And there are lots of novellas out there that do multi-POV really well. There's a really fantastic adult sci-fi author, Mary Robinette Kowal, and she writes some really wonderful short stories. She's also a novelist. She's won a bunch of Hugos and Campbell Awards. She's super famous. For all of you Jane Austen fans out there, she has a series that's Jane Austen with magic, and it's really, really good. Anyway, she did a lecture series, or she was part of a lecture series through BYU with Brandon Sanderson. And the one that I watched yesterday was on short stories and the formula for a short story and thinking about the length. And I found it so fascinating. She has a formula, like a mathematical formula, where you put in the number of POV characters, or actually it's just the number of characters in general, and the number of scene locations you have, and you multiply that by the types of the different mice quotient elements you're playing with, and you can come up with a word count number. It's super weird and math nerdy, but we're sci-fi here, so I figure it applies. And I just found that to be a really interesting thing to think about when you're working with shorter works of fiction and making sure that you are dealing with an amount of material that's reasonable for the length. So that's something to think about. Definitely look it up. I think it was lecture number 7 in that series. I don't know. I didn't watch the rest of them, but that one was really good.
Generally, Brandon Sanderson has amazing resources on writing, all free. So cool.
Yeah. That's my thought about novellas. I don't know. Go ahead.
I've never written a novella, but I can only say that several points of view is always kind of touch and go there, because if you don't have a very distinct voice in one point of view and then you do several, it can be very not engaging with the reader. So as little as possible is my advice. Yeah,
and Alechia, you did dual POV in The Sound of Stars.
Yeah.
And I did 3 POVs in Tarnished. And I don't know if you agree with me here, but juggling multiple POVs, even when it's just 2, it's twice as complicated. So it does become a more intense process of, even just revision is intense because you're juggling so many different lines.
I think for me, when I wrote multiple, I wrote just two, and I did a spreadsheet. I think I was talking to you about organization the other day.
Yeah.
And I did a spreadsheet of both of my characters, what they like, what they talk about, their personalities, and so every time I went into a different point of view, it was like I got into that voice again. So I really had to keep putting myself through that. That said, I think two is my limit. I don't foresee having to do more than two. I just don't know if that's necessary for me personally.
I have big lofty goals of writing one with like a lot, but it's one of those things that I'm like, someday I will do this in an alternate dimension because I don't actually want to do it. I just want to have done it.
It's hard. I mean, if you're good. Your book was amazing. So
Thank you.
and some people, most people who get it published and do multiple point of views are usually very, very good. Let's be honest. But the hard part is when you're a querying writer and you wrote multiple point of views, it's not going to be like, a lot of agents are going to jump on that right away. That might be a detracting factor. Might be.
If you don't nail it, it's definitely harder. And in terms of sci-fi, I'm here representing the single POV, I guess. We're in order. I'm single, dual, triple. Yeah.
It's okay. I'm writing single POV for my next book, and it's so much easier.
It is easier in a lot of ways, except if you don't choose the right character, because
then it's a nightmare.
Literally limiting. You could. I
think my editor almost tried to suggest a second POV. We were talking on the phone about my edits, and he was like, "What about this character feels like maybe there's a little bit more to them." And I was like, no, we're not doing that again. You cannot trick me.
Well, speaking of sci-fi and fundamentals, we got a good one about world building that I like. In sci-fi and fantasy, how do you make a world that feels real without drawing too heavily on existing cultures, even if they're your own? I love this question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that, and I say this at the risk of being wrong, and please correct me, but with sci-fi specifically, not necessarily fantasy, but with sci-fi, I think you have to draw on real world cultures. I don't necessarily think you have to draw on someone else's real world culture. I don't necessarily think you should. But I do think that with sci-fi, you are playing in a space of plausibility. And so you have to extrapolate on some kind of existing community, whether that's your own human existence right now and you just add a bit of technology, or if that's a far future, but you are still drawing on the real world.
I agree.
Obviously with fantasy you have a lot more space to be. Fantasy
doesn't have to be this world. It's a whole different, it's a whole different world in itself. So you can create a world, and I think that is interesting world building. For me, my sci-fi was Earth-based, but futuristic Earth dystopian. So I get to rely on the cultures that existed before and then kind of create an existence now, So I don't know. I think it's such a nice question. I never got to answer anything like that. It's very exciting.
No, it's fun. And not to take us in a totally different direction, but I love questions about querying. Let's put ourselves through it. After you started sending queries, how long did it take for you to get an offer of rep? And Rosiee and I covered this kind of in the last one, that things have changed a lot. So you can't necessarily use our experience as the norm. In 2016, was that the year?
Yes.
Sure, that was the year for me. 8 weeks? 8 weeks. I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, which is actually weirdly fast, at least for me. I do know people who are like the unicorns, but I was not a unicorn. So I think that's—
How did that compare to your first time querying?
Very different.
Yeah.
The first time is 6 months, I think. And I did some R&Rs for an agent in that time. So it was a lot longer. It's my first book though, so I'm not surprised.
For me, it was my first book. It was not very good yet. It wasn't good yet. And I queried it in, I think, December 2016. Also, did not get any offers of rep on that. Got a mentorship invite from Justina Ireland, and Tamara Matea became my mentor. We did that for 3 months. And then we set that book aside. And then I wrote another book, and I my first time pitching it, I pitched it to Pitch Wars, didn't get in. And then I pitched it during Pit Mad like a week later, and then that was like a Thursday. On Monday, I had my first offer of rep.
Nice.
So
wow,
that was fast. However, since then, it's been like finding the right match for agent and finding, just making sure that you are working with somebody who's going to be great for your career and you understand and you fit together. My second time querying was 1 month. And then my third time querying was 9 months. So boom. And that was just because it was the summer, I think. But
yeah. And when was your third time querying? It was more recently, right?
It was February to October, I think.
And querying legitimately, I swear, it takes longer now. It
does.
Things
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the same with sub.
I didn't hear back from people. Mostly a lot of my I think I queried maybe 50, and about 40 of them were no, not 40. I think like maybe 20 were just no responses at all. And then eventually they trickled in after I already accepted an offer somewhere else. But like another 20 were, yeah, you write sci-fi right now, so we just don't know how to place it. And I was like really crushing because I had just had this book. I'm having a book coming out that's like sci-fi. So, that was scary.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the thing about publishing is like it's not just about like making it, like getting an agent. There's so much more that comes after that. Isn't it fun?
Super fun time. Yeah, I only queried once so far. Fingers crossed I don't have to do it again. And I think it took about 3.5 months for me to land an agent after I first started querying. But my situation is very weird because I was in Pitch Wars and went through what I would consider a hell revision. So I rewrote the whole book in like 2 weeks right after the 2016 election. It was the worst thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. I still sometimes like stress out about it, even though it was like 4 years ago. And so when I sent out my queries, I wasn't feeling very confident. The book had not had a line edit. It had just like a massive rewrite. And then I had to send it out with like I had a thumbs up from my mentor and that was it. And it was kind of like, okay, we're doing this. So I did a little bit more revision in the following months before I sent out any real queries. And so I didn't actually send out any cold queries until February after that. And I got my agent like a month later. So really a month, but I did send out queries before that just through Pitch Wars. But yeah, it's very different now.
So wild how different our experiences are. It's just like really wild.
And I just cold queried. What? It was timing. I finished my book in early February of 2016, which is like you might as well just query.
Yeah.
So I did. Yeah. All right, let's talk about CPs and betas because I just love this kind of stuff. How many revision passes do you do before giving it to CP/betas, and how many of your passes are developmental or big picture? We could also substitute CPs, betas for agents in our case if our books go to agents first. I personally have CPs who read my zero draft because they love me, so I'm not ashamed. They can read my garbage. It's fine. Someone has to.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I get the most out of CP relationships now, at least, by having someone read as I'm writing. In previous situations before I had an agent, I did multiple drafts, obviously. I did I think 8 or 9 on my debut before I queried it, partially thanks to Pitch Wars. But now, my agent hasn't even looked at my new book. It went straight to my editor. So she read the synopsis in the first chapter, I think 6 months ago.
See, for me, when I'm drafting, I'm revising at the same time. So I'll write 3 to 4 chapters, right? Start a draft. And then I'll revise those and edit. I'll edit before I start writing again. So I stay in the same mind frame of what I'm writing. And I keep going until it's completely finished. And that's my process. By the time I'm finished drafting the book, it's like draft 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So then I will give it to my CPs in 4 parts. and each person will get a part. I'll go through their notes, then I'll send it to my next CP, and we'll do that again. And until I feel, and I have about 3 CPs. And then when it's completely done, then I'll ask a beta reader. And that's my process. But when it comes to like my editor or something like that, then it's like, I just send it. But that's I have to have it like as clean as possible. And otherwise I don't know, I panic. Like, oh no, it's a typo. Somebody's gonna get mad at me. I don't want to upset anyone. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it really is a very different situation when you are when you're dealing with a deadline, or when you're dealing with sending to an editor on a proposal or something like that to be acquired. You don't necessarily send it to a bunch of CPs before anyone else sees it. I think I had 2 or 3 people read my proposal, which was my synopsis and my first 50 pages before I sent it to my editor, but they were mostly people who were just kind of giving me like, this is fine. You're fine to send this to your editor. Like, this is not actively bad. So I didn't really have anyone. But I think when you pre-publication, when you're not on a deadline, when you're not on any sort of
then you can take time. Yeah.
Then you can take more time. I think that before that, I did several drafts of my book before sending it to CPs, because I knew I wanted to change things. So especially, I was writing Tarnished way back in the day, and it has changed genres multiple times. It started out as historical fiction, which made no sense for the book. It's weird. Started out as historical fiction, changed it to alternate historical fiction, and then was like, what would be great is if I set this in space. So it's like I had to go through multiple drafts of it just on my own. Yeah, right. But I did multiple drafts on my own just to fix world building elements that I knew I wanted to change. And I don't think I sent it to any sort of real CP until about draft 4 or 5. But also I didn't have CPs before that. I didn't know anyone. I hadn't made any friends yet. I was kind of just writing in my house by myself, not on the internet at all. So I think it depends on when you feel like you've done everything big that you want to do, and you need a second pair of eyes. If you feel like you can still edit and you know what you want to do and there's still big changes you want to make, that's not worth sending to someone unless you need advice on which big change to make.
Yeah. So before I move into a series of questions that are really good, kind of crafty questions, I want to ask the plotter or pantser question. Everyone knows that, I'm technically a pantser, but really I fall in the middle now. So I'm a plantser. We're going to go with that. Alechia?
I'm a plantser.
Nice.
I'm also a plantser. I was notoriously a plotter before, and now I'm a plantser because it just doesn't.
When you got to write fast, you got to write fast.
Yeah.
Book 2s, everything goes out the window, generally on contract. All right, so just plantser fam. I think some of the people joining much later are outliners, so.
Okay, well, I will say, like, I used to be an outliner, and I have a pretty heavy outlining background, so I can still speak to that. My personal method now has fallen somewhere in the middle. But
all right, so this one's about kind of ideas and getting started. What do you do if you have a lot of ideas but none are big, fleshed out enough to start writing?
Okay, well, this is going to speak to the outliners of the world. I outline. I do actually make an outline. I don't do a detailed outline anymore, but I will write basically a synopsis. I want to make sure that I know what my beginning, middle, and end are. And I need to figure that out before I start writing, obviously. Usually, if I don't have a fleshed out enough idea, it's because I'm missing an element. It's usually because the character arc isn't interesting, or because I don't have a setting, or because I don't have a villain or something like that. I need to figure out what my missing piece is. And outlining really helps me with that. Susan Dennard's synopsis article on PubCrawl is like the best thing in the world. And I will just use that to write a really basic synopsis. And if I am still interested in exploring the themes and ideas I've come up with when writing that synopsis, if I'm still interested in that by the end of writing the synopsis, then I know I can write the idea. If I'm not interested anymore, if just like writing out the outline was the fun part, and now I'm like, I don't really want to write the book, then I know it's not going to be an interesting book.
That's a hack I've used as well. And actually now I'm like, I should make a video on this, forcing myself to write a synopsis, because I don't outline. But a synopsis is very different. It's very top line. And if you have nothing to write in the next paragraph, you haven't developed your idea enough. And you have to kind of force yourself. And then what happens? And it's a conflict. I feel conflict is usually missing when an idea isn't gelling. So
yeah.
For me, it's if I have an idea and I'm like, I really want to write this, but I can't figure out what I want to write, like how, or like the main part of it, I will always write the first 3 chapters. And then I will sit down and try to write a synopsis. And if I can't come up with a synopsis, then I will go for a nice long walk. And this has always been my thing, is I go for a walk and I have music on and I'm thinking about this so hard. And usually by the end of the walk, I'll have figured out what I need to do. And then I'll continue writing. And if I get stuck again, that's where I'll go back. Or I'll, if I really am still stuck, I'll evaluate if I should write or not. But I usually know if I should write something by the first 50 pages. So if I don't know by then, it's not a good idea. But I also like to brainstorm with my CPs and friends, and that also really helps.
Yeah, I think having that, like the story seed, isn't enough for me to usually sit down and write 3 chapters that will make it to the end. But it is enough for me to write 3 chapters that are basically an exploration of character or world. And sometimes I don't know what the story is that I'm going to tell until I get into that character's head and start writing in the world that I've created and figure it out. Because sometimes you get in there and you're like, oh, that's the piece I'm missing. And I'm clearly going in this direction, so that's what it's going to be. And by the time you're done writing those first 3 chapters, you have your missing piece. So it just depends what kind of writer you are. And I think if you're the kind of writer who writes those first 3 chapters and that's how you find the thing that's missing, you might have a little bit of pantser in you.
That might be true, but it works out. I like do it, and then I do the synopsis right after. But it has to be a strong feeling. You have to really. For me, I don't really always think of like the world building. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about the character.
Yeah.
Right away. That's like the number one, and then I go from there, and everything else just kind of expands on that.
And I will also throw in sometimes it's a sign and it's okay to leave something on the back burner. Some ideas need longer to percolate. So the Ivies, my thriller coming out next year, I had percolating for, it was years, at least 2, if not 3. I want to write a book about college admissions. That's not a plot. And then I know, right? And then one day it just came to me like, ideas are weird, and it's the spark can come out of nowhere. The next one I'm writing, same thing. All I had was a plot twist. That's also not a plot, right? It's just 1 a.m. one night, and it came to me. So sometimes you just need literally just time. You need to live your life and write other things. So it's tricky. It's the line between, do I have to force myself to come up with stuff to happen, or do I need to wait 6 months? So.
Yeah, I'm totally the same way.
Yeah, but I won't write until I have that spark. I have
the spark. Exactly.
I need the spark. But there's I have at least 2 to 3 ideas that are in my head that are just not where it needs to be, so I just leave them over there and I don't bother them for a while, and then eventually they'll come back up. Yeah. So
yeah,
and sometimes it needs time.
Yeah, something that I find really helps me, and part of this is because of where I'm at in my career and what I have to do in order to justify writing an idea. But something that really helps me is if I write a pitch for the book before I write it. So even if I don't know the full idea yet, I just need to write a pitch for it. The exercise of writing a query letter or like a back of the book blurb helps you find the pockets that you're missing. Because oftentimes this is what happens for me. I will write a synopsis or I will write a pitch for the book that I want to write. And I will sit down and go, okay, looking at this objectively if I was an agent reading this query. And part of this is that I have experience reading queries. I was an agent assistant for 2 years. But doing that for my own work, and thinking about, well, what would make this more compelling? You know, what would make me go, ooh, as I'm reading this query? Sometimes that helps me figure out that the story I'm thinking about telling is not actually the story that I want to tell. And that can come in how you're describing the like cool plot twist or the cool stakes. And you get there and you're like, man, it would be really cool if this was the stake, or like, it would be a great plot twist right here if I were able to say this instead, and just explore that. You haven't written the book yet. You can change it at any time. So thinking about it from that perspective. Yeah, I know. We're the masters of our own stories.
So before I jump into the next two, which are related to each other, I can kind of see the chat ahead of time. Rosiee, someone would like to know if Thor is your real name.
So I will say that Thor alone is not my real name, but it is part of my name, and it is how all of my family shortens our last name because it is too hard to pronounce and too hard to spell for most people. So our entire family uses Thor as like a shorthand. My parents have a business and their website uses Thor instead of their full last name because no one can spell it. And so we do all kind of use that as a shorthand. And when I was picking a pen name, it was like, well, this is an obvious choice because it's what I go by, but it's not my legal name. So it is still part of my name. It's just not the full name.
I also saw a question where they want to know if you two have considered joining AuthorTube because they would love to see more traditionally published authors.
So I will say I actually used to be a booktuber like 10 years ago. And I have thought about it, but I'm really iffy about putting my face on the internet because I'm like,
it's real weird.
Yeah. But I have thought about it because it is fun. Yeah. I'm much more comfortable in conversations like this and like being in conversation with people than I am just on my own. But I certainly thought about it.
I do live chats all the time.
Yeah.
I just pre-record because it suits my schedule better when I'm not self-isolating.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I'm basically learning how to use the internet like still at this point. So I could do something like that. I don't know if anybody's really interested in seeing me do something like that. But
I am here to guide anyone who would like to go to panels. Join me. All right. Okay. So the next two are basically about the same part of the book. So tips on weaving your B plot into your story and advice on writing middles, which is kind of the same. And I will confess, I find giving advice on this really tricky. Like yes, you need to do it, but how? Tips?
Well, I will also admit that I find this really tricky because writing the middle is the worst part of writing the book. I think something that really changed how I view story structure and really helped me to like kind of conceptualize the B plot and the middle is realizing that the middle is actually twice as long as the beginning and the end. And that your book is not, when you think about like 3-act structure, it's not 3 equal parts. Yeah. Act 2 is twice as long. So it's actually quarters. And so if you think about it in 4-part structure, it's actually more accurate to like, if you want to divide it up, if you want to get mathy. And that really changed things for me because I think I was finding that the middle just I didn't have enough space.
It's like it never ends. It just goes on and on and on. And you're like, are we there yet?
Yeah. Well, I was finding that I was writing middles that weren't meaty enough because I wanted to make it an equal part. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't actually writing a B plot. I was just kind of making the B plot super chill and like not very interesting. And when I realized that and was able to restructure my plot, that's kind of when I unlocked pacing for myself. So that's one thing to think about is that you might be dealing with a middle or B plot that is not meaty enough to fill the space. Or it might be that you're dealing with too many threads and it's too much to fit in the space.
I do all my books are in 4 parts. So for me, it all is like, like this, right? The beginning is expo and all that other stuff you need to get in there, the hook, and then you're going up in the second part. You're at the peak at the beginning, in between the 2 and the 3, and you're starting to just de-escalate a little bit, and then you're going up a little at the end, and that's my whole. It's like I see it as a map. That's a weird thing to say. Sorry, but that's how I see it. And in the middle, I try to I want to know, are we looking at the characters, how they're experiencing, what they're experiencing, how they're adapting, what is their arc? And I think that's really important, is to make sure that you're actually going like this at some point. Because otherwise, what's the point? And I think that's where I really go, is just making sure that they're not reacting and that they're acting. And making sure that, you know, you are weaving those elements in for your B plot, but you have to also, I guess I write really character driven things. So I think that's where I kind of just like, this is the moment we're going to explore this character and why they are the way they are. I don't know.
I think with a B plot, it's really important to remember that it shouldn't be too far off from your A plot. Yeah. It needs to be interwoven and it needs to be related. The B plot should be a direct cause and effect. Yeah. If your A plot wasn't happening, your B plot wouldn't happen. Yeah. That's what you want to have. It's kind of like closed parentheses. Your A plot is here and your B plot needs to be here in like another set of parentheses. And you have to make sure that you're closing your B plot before you close your A plot, and you need to make sure that they're interrelated. So if, for example, if your B plot is a romance, you want to make sure that that romance is related to the larger plot. So if you're dealing with like, we have to reclaim our planet from the evil alien Zor, but you know, like I don't know. You want to make sure that's my next book. You want to make sure that the romance that you're writing would only happen in this scenario. You want to make sure that the characters who are falling in love are falling in love because of the circumstances that they're in, because of the A plot. Yeah. So if it's not interrelated, if it's not complicated by the A plot or caused by the A plot, then I would say reconsider your B plot, because it may be that it's not related to your main plot enough.
Yeah, I think I struggle to talk about B plots because I'm always afraid I'm going to sound stupid or say something wrong. Because
like I just said, yeah, but no, you sound really, really clever, Rosie.
Doesn't come naturally to me, and that's the thing, Rosie. It's that the A plot and the B plot should be so intricately connected that it should be tricky to pull them apart, because one shouldn't be able to exist without the other. So I was literally like, what's in? So actually, my thriller has the easiest B plot to dissect, except you cannot pull it apart from the A, which is there's two joins the investigation, which is just a basic bitch B plot for a thriller. There's someone who joins the investigation. It's just typical. But the investigation is part of the A plot, which involves the murder, and he's just there. And so like this romantic tension building within that, and you can't pull them apart from each other. So where does the B plot end and the A plot begin? I don't know.
Yeah. I do think though that it is important to identify what your overarching like world plot is, like the big plot versus a character plot, if there's a difference between the two, because you want to make sure that you're resolving them in a way that is, I'm going to just go back to this video I watched yesterday about Mary Robinette Kowal being a genius on the internet. She was talking about this, and that if you're writing it's a murder mystery, and a widow's husband gets murdered, and it's, you know, super gruesome. The first chapter is you find the dead body on the floor, and then a detective comes in and they start working to solve the crime together, but then they fall in love. You have to also find out who killed the guy. You can't just go off in one direction and be like, no, it's a romance, and we don't find out how he died.
Like, could it be the love interest? Dun dun.
Exactly. And that's what I'm talking about, though, is you want to make sure that your B plot and your A plot are interconnected, but that they're also both getting resolved, because I think sometimes what happens is one of the plots gets forgotten in favor of the other, and then we just lose the thread completely, and then at the very end somebody pops up and is like, it was the butler, and like there's no connection. So you want to make sure that the two are super interwoven so that they're affecting each other, and that makes the most compelling story, I think.
Yeah. All right, so I lost part of the chat because we fell so behind. It's fine. We're gonna jump right ahead to this. We're going to talk about our feelings. How do you deal with this thought that your story idea might not be good enough, that you're scared that no one else will care about the thing that you want to write? Are you okay, Rosie? Are you on the phone?
Everything's fine.
So we all feel this way. Alone. This is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say you just have to, you gotta shut down that voice as much as possible to write the thing. First of all, writing the thing. And then once you have the thing, friends really help. Like, you know, CPs and betas, and eventually it'll be an agent or even an editor to remind you we care. But it's definitely tricky. What do you guys do?
Lay on the floor.
On the floor. That's great.
I simultaneously have massive imposter syndrome and also a massive ego, and it's not good.
That's normal. It's the only way to get through the day, Rose.
I mean, I know. Well, part of it is that, like, you have to believe in yourself to a certain extent. And I say that jokingly. I don't actually have a massive ego. I am too short for that, actually. But you have to believe in yourself to a certain extent. There is a certain amount of, like, you do have to believe in your story, and you do have to think that it's important. And also you have to be humble enough to understand that it's also not necessarily perfect. So you have to fit somewhere in that middle, and oftentimes we will swing one way or the other. And so there will be times when you finish a draft of your book and you're like, this is amazing, I'm going to turn it into my editor and he's going to love it. And then he comes back and he's like, it's bad. And you're like, well, darn, misjudged that situation. But then there will be times when you turn in a book and you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever written. Everyone's going to hate this. I hate this. I hate myself. And then your agent comes back and is like, this is genius. We're putting it on submission right now.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just lose sight of your own work, I think. And it's important to find that balance and understand that you will swing between them.
Yeah, I'm always oscillating between that. Basically, I have no confidence in myself at all, and I'm always like, not at all.
High five.
I loved writing The Sound of Stars. I thought writing The Sound of Stars was really fun. I wrote it in a month.
Really?
And it was one of those books.
We should talk about fast drafting.
Amazing.
It came together, and I was like, yes. But did I think it was amazing? No. I don't think anything I do is actually amazing. I only think it gets better when more people help me make it better. And even then, I could still, could I have done this? Could I have done that? I'm not that person. I'm not to the point where I'm really confident in what I do, but I have to push myself anyway.
Yeah. And that's most authors aren't confident in what they do, but we pretend that we're confident in what we do on the internet to make it seem like we are.
I don't even pretend on the internet. I think I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes. It's just sometimes you get the spark and you write out a book, and I just open Microsoft Word. I don't have Scrivener. I don't have any of these things, and I know other people really work with that. And I just put it on Microsoft Word, and then I just write. I go right linear and I don't do anything else. And then I read it, and sometimes I think, oh, this is a really good book idea. And then other times, most of the time, it's like, oh, this is crap. I don't know. And we'll see. I guess I ask somebody, and I'm like, hey, is this terrible? Because I think it is.
I think that if you don't think your writing is terrible at some point, something's wrong. It's actually a good sign that if you hate your book at turns. So related, this just dovetails nicely. How do you not get discouraged when you read a book that's amazing and you reread your manuscript and suddenly it's so bad? Get on the floor, cry, drink some wine.
That's really the best coping mechanism. I find that becoming as horizontal as possible is really good.
Well, so it's normal to have those feelings, but first of all, this happens to us all the time, but we've been through the process. So you have to understand the final copy of something that you read is not the writer in their natural state. They had a first draft at some point, and they had people involved in that manuscript, a genius editor or a magic CP, just like you can do. And so meaning they didn't just barf out a perfect book. Books take work. So you should never compare your first draft or second draft or third to a published copy, I think.
Yes, I agree with that.
Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, no, go ahead.
When I read a book that is just absolutely extraordinary and you read the lines and you're like, how did they do that? It's so good. then first you can get discouraged if you want. You can take the time to get it discouraged and feel like, oh, I can't do that. Or what I like to do is I will write down phrases that I found were really powerful in that writing, or what techniques that I saw that I don't use myself. And then I will start to really look at that and think, well, how can I do my best work based on how they're doing this? And it's not like you're just gonna like copy it, but it gets you thinking about how you might phrase something differently based on that. And I think that really helps me not get discouraged, is because everybody starts somewhere and nobody is done learning. You're always learning all the time. And to not get discouraged, use it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that analysis is a really helpful tool in writing. I think finding people who are doing whatever it is you are trying to do, but they're doing it better, is a really great way to then deconstruct what you're not doing. So there's actually a really good example of this on YouTube from someone you probably all watch, Katie Tastic. She does an incredible breakdown of the Hunger Games and the pacing. And actually, that's how I learned how to plot and pace like my books way, way, way back. Like this was well before I knew Kat. I used her videos to learn 3-act structure. And that's how I plotted my books. It's still how I plot my books. I use her structure for that. And it's because she broke down the Hunger Games chapter by chapter to see what Susan Collins was doing to make the pacing work. And it's genius. And that sort of dissection of someone who's doing something brilliantly, I find really helpful. As I'm sure you can tell, I'm like really into like the analysis and the math of it, which is weird because I don't like math. But if you can break it down and understand what it is that someone else is doing and how they're doing it and why it works so well, then you can begin to understand that from like a logical, analytical standpoint, and then apply it to your own work without stealing. Don't steal. That's bad.
Yeah. No, stealing bad.
Stealing's bad.
Yeah.
Understanding technique and trying to see why you think your work isn't as good or how you might make yours better. I think that's a powerful tool.
I do think that you can also do that with stories that you find lacking, but there is a danger there. So you want to be, careful of that. But if you're looking at a book that you really enjoyed and then something goes wrong in the process of it and you don't like it, then you can dissect that from the perspective of, okay, well, what went wrong and why, and how can I avoid doing that? But be really careful of that, because that can become petty and it can turn into like a kind of a gross cycle of like hating on people for no reason. So just be careful of that, but dissect the things that you think are doing it really well. So like the Hunger Games example, or then dissect books that you read that didn't live up to the expectation and figure out why, so you can avoid that.
Hunger Games is how I taught myself how to do first person that didn't suck.
Hunger Games is so good.
She's a master.
I love that book so much. Yeah, I reread it all the time.
Question: have either of you written fan fiction ever?
Yes.
No. There's a fanfic related question. I just want to throw it quickly because I like it. What's the biggest mindset shift that you've experienced going from writing fanfic to original fic, and how did you manage it? I've talked about this before, but for me, it was learning to break out of writing by community, by like heavily collaborative writing, because fandom is a community. You have your betas and your friends, and it's bouncing ideas off each other, and it's sending bits of your fic, and fics are short. So like you're not, really burdening someone with 500 words. But when you're writing novels, you can't just send someone 50,000 words and be like, can you read this in 24 hours so that I can write the next scene? Like that's not reasonable. And I had to like teach myself to trust myself. That was the biggest change for me. And then of course, just pushing through lengthwise. The longest fic I ever wrote was 40K, and I thought I would never top that. And then, novels. Yeah, that's me.
I'll say that most of my fanfic writing days were when I was much younger. Because I'm busy, not because I don't think it's a genuine and exciting place to be in terms of writing, but I just don't have time. I wrote a lot of fan fiction in middle school and high school and really, really enjoyed it. It was, like you said, the community aspect of it, I think, was one of the best parts. You're getting immediate feedback. You're getting immediate validation. And that's really powerful. And that's why I have readers who will read my work as I'm writing it, because that's so helpful. The thing for me that was the biggest jump is when you're writing fanfic, there's a certain shorthand of character development. You don't have to necessarily put in the work to develop the character that's already been developed for you. Yes, there are fics where you're fixing a character development or where you're developing a character in a totally different direction. But for the most part, people who are coming into fanfic, they're coming in to read your fic, they know the character already, and they don't need you to establish them. And so that's a skill that I had to learn that I couldn't learn from fanfic, because I wasn't in a position where I was establishing these characters and establishing the world. This world and characters were ready-made and given to me to work with. So I was playing in someone else's sandbox, and now I have to build my own sandbox. It's kind of how it is. Obviously, there are still cultural touchstones that you can work with and shorthand that makes sense, especially in sci-fi when you're dealing with like technology. There are just certain words that you can use and people will understand what you mean, and you don't have to explain how a spaceship works. But, you know, there's certain pieces that you do have to build for yourself, and that's a very different experience.
Yeah. True. So I'm going to throw this up quickly before we have Demetra join us. We got a fourth person, because this is just related. How do you keep up motivation to write without external validation? For me, you have to be not so much in love, but fascinated by whatever story it is that you're writing. Like that you, and the pantsing helps with this, honestly, that you want to know what happens next. That's my motivation personally. I want to write the big emotional scenes. I want to know what's going to happen to my characters. I mean, yeah, I'm in charge, but am I? That personally is my motivation fuel, rather than someone else reading it and telling me they love it. But this, even if you haven't done fanfic, like, where do you guys get that external motivation to write, to finish?
I'm a tiny 5-foot human filled with spite. And I just want to stick it to the people who told me I couldn't do it, or the people who are telling me that my books aren't interesting, or people who are telling me that the types of characters that I write are not wanted by publishing. Obviously, you know, I'm writing in a space that's difficult. I'm writing a lot of queer stuff, and people in publishing often told me that that was not going to be successful for me. And it so far has been. So it's like, I'm going to just keep doing that and prove to them that they're wrong. And that is what fuels me. I'm just a big ball of anger.
Boom.
I think my answer is both of yours, really. A lot of people told me I couldn't write Black characters who are the main characters falling in love. Like, that's just not something that they want to have happen, or, you know, being different, or marginalized in any possible way, succeeding. And, you know, that kind of propels me forward, where I want to write characters that are more like me and more like the teen I was and the teens I was friends with, and the diverse world we live in. And I want that to be something that is normalized. So for me, that's one way that I can propel myself forward. The other is that I get also really into what I'm doing. You know, like when I write a book, I put my headphones in, I go for my walk, I visualize each scene, and the more I visualize it and when I write it, then the more the details come in. And because I'm so excited about that, and even if I'd already outlined or I've already used the synopsis, I really enjoy where it's going, and I know I'm gonna really look forward to writing one chapter in like the next 5 chapters, and I'm like so excited that I don't need anybody telling me, yeah, this is great, or, you know, whatever. I really want to see where it's gonna go, and so I just keep writing, and that makes me happy.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna add our next author to the stream. Very exciting. Okay, everyone, welcome Demetra.
Hi. How's it going? How'd it go?
Good. We were here. We're split 4. We look so professional. Demetra, introduce yourself. Your books,
Yes, I'm Jennieke Brodsky. I'm the author of Dive Smack, which came out in 2018. It was a Junior Library Guild selection, and I have Last Girls coming out on May 5th, and this is a book about sisters, secrets, and survival set in the world of doomsday preppers. Both books from Torteen, so I'm very excited. It's a strange time to be having a book come out, as you guys all know.
We haven't talked about that yet.
I think it's just, it's something good and positive to hang on to in this time, and I think we just go for it, right?
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna throw up a question quickly because I think it's a good opener with a new person on. How many books, novellas, short stories, etc., did we write before our first published book? So essentially, our first published book, what version was that? I'm easy. My first published book was my third book that I wrote. No short stories, no novellas, other than fanfic, but that's different.
Same, exactly the same. Third, nothing else.
Third time's the charm. Rosie?
God, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I would count it as my third finished novel. But I definitely wrote short stories before that, and I wrote a lot of fan fiction, and I wrote a lot of partial novels before that. But third finished novel.
All right, magic number.
So Dive Smack was the second book I wrote. The first one was a Greek mythology, and but before that, even in college and whatever, I wrote poetry. So I had taken this poetry class. I got really into that. So it started with poetry. I lost my job in the recession in 2009, whatever, when that last recession happened, and I decided to freelance and try doing the thing that I always wanted to do, the thing people told me I shouldn't do. Don't be a writer, you're not going to make any money. So I did that, and I didn't even know there was a world out there of a writing community and YA community and all this stuff. I was just doing it to kind of keep myself occupied and creative.
I should say, before I wrote my books, I was a food writer, a food critic.
Oh, that's cool.
It was exciting. I liked it. I love writing about food, but I did that for a few years as well. But I wouldn't count that as writing fiction.
I have a journalism degree, so there's definitely some background there, but it's not fiction. Yeah. So yeah. All right. So I know at least one person's done this. I don't know about anyone else. This question is, how do you redraft when you need to expand your story? Do you rewrite completely, Rosiee Thor? Or do you edit the existing story? That's me. So who's done a rewrite? We know Rosie has. Anyone else?
I'm actually outlining for a rewrite right now for that mythology story, but I work on the existing story. I try, if I have to add a new plot line, I just go in and I make, notes, and I'm old school. I feel like I have to print it out and use sticky notes and crazy stuff to just keep the places. But yeah, it's hard to do because once you have that finished story in your mind, I find it hard to go in and add new threads. I think that's tough.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on the scale of the rewrite. And I've done both a lot, notoriously. I rewrote Tarnished 11 times total before it got published. And part of that is because the changes I was making to it were so large. I would say that Tarnished was my learning book, and I am, lucky that I got it published and I didn't have to go off and write another book, but it did take a lot of work to get it to be publishable. And so, like I said earlier in the chat, the first time I wrote that book, it was historical fiction and it was bad and there was no salvaging that. And so I completely rewrote it because I was changing genres.
Right.
When you're changing a genre, there's not a lot that you can keep. Tarnished, the only part that I kept of Tarnished from the first draft to the last draft is actually that first scene of the book. It's changed a little bit, but it's mostly the same. I'd say about the first 500 to 1,000 words or so are pretty much the same.
I think that's great.
And that's the only part that stayed because the rest of it was changing so much. The other drafts that I was changing, I changed who the love interest was. I changed the sexualities of the characters. I changed who the villain was. I changed why the villain was doing what they were doing. And then, I mean, the biggest change that happened for me late in the game was that my editor wanted me to add a third POV to the book. And that completely changed everything because all of a sudden I had to rethink that character's motivation and how to make it a much closer experience for the reader. And so I had to completely rethink the book at that point. So, yeah.
You did it.
You did do it. That's amazing.
The thing is that once you do it once, it's so much easier to do it again. The idea someone asked in the feed, I'm keeping an eye out, that like tossing all those words would probably be super heartbreaking. And it is.
I'm sorry.
It is. I'm not gonna lie, it sucks. But the thing is that, and this was super true for me with Tarnished, and in the moment it was really tough, but looking back, I'm really glad I did it because I was growing as a writer while I was doing it. And the writer that I was when I wrote the first draft is not the same writer that I was when I wrote the last draft at all.
Right.
Like I'm so much better now than I was then. And if I had just worked with that draft that I had written the first time and just made edits, I never would have been able to level the book up. There's only so far that I could take it within that framework. I needed to completely change the framework in order to make it better. And so I think sometimes it's important to look at your work critically and understand that the framework you've built for yourself isn't working. And that if you just try to fix it where it's at, it will never be as good as if you were to deconstruct it completely and reconstruct it using the new tools that you have. But for example, like right now, I turned in a first draft to my editor and I'm now reworking it, and it is not a full rewrite. I'm rewriting the middle, but I'm keeping basically the beginning intact, and the end will have some changes. What now?
Feel easier? This time around?
Yes and no. I have to do it in 5 weeks during a pandemic, so
Yes.
And it's a very long book. It's 110,000 words, and it's fantasy, so it's a different space that I'm working in. It's a lot of new stuff for me, but I'm more confident in it. So I think that's part of it, is that I have built my skills to a point where I feel more confident in my work when I do it. I say that now, in about 20 minutes I'll be laying on the floor texting Alexa being like, I'm the worst at this. So yeah.
You're not.
But yeah, I think, be okay with tossing out work if it's not good. But rewriting is writing, and it can allow you to grow in much more impactful ways, I think, than just like little editing. So I don't know. That's why I'm such a big fan of Scrivener, because you can have like 2 screens at once and you can look at the old draft while you're writing the new draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that means the rest of us have done big edits within an existing framework. We don't throw out the book. I can't even fathom it. And so I just did that with my thriller. Like, I basically changed who my main character was. It was fun. And it's just, you take it one scene at a time. It's slow. You deal with ripples. Once you make one big change, you're just gonna have a ton of ripples. And it's just a process. And indeed, you have to decide, like, how major is it? Like, for me, my framework didn't change. It was still a murder investigation. It's just my main character has a little less knowledge, which changes the type of person she is. And I had to add investigation threads, but that was all workable. I would have cried if I'd had to start over. So yeah, that's me. All right. Here's a quickie kind of querying kind of question. Are there rules or etiquette guidelines in terms of editing your book while it is out with agents? If you get good feedback for potential changes, should you wait to hear back first from those additional agents? Has anyone done revisions and editing while querying?
I did for my first book with Fatal Threads, and I think it was a little bit of a mistake to do that because I ended up with a lot of versions. So it would be like a version based on like agent's first name, and so it got a little messy there. I think to get all your feedback first and then just wait and see if there's consistency in that feedback is probably a better thing to do than what I did when I knew nothing about writing, but I would wait personally.
I think there's a balance for it. I haven't actually done it, but I've seen quite a few mentees through that process. When you get an R&R, there's a certain amount of you got to gut check yourself and make sure that you're not just doing it to get an agent. You want to make sure that you're doing it because you think it's what's right for the book. If you're doing it because you want that agent, I mean, decide what you want to do. If you decide to do it anyway, I wouldn't pull it from other agents, because if you still believe in the version that's out, there's no reason for you to change it. If you get an R&R and it's a huge change and you have a light bulb moment and it's like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant, then I think it's worth doing. And I think it's worth pulling from anyone else that you've sent it to. Or if you've only sent out queries and you're just waiting to see if they bite, they might then request and you can write back saying, I just recently got an R&R on this book. Is it okay if I send the revised? I'm anticipating being done with it in 2 to 3 months, something like that. Most agents will be fine with that. Yeah, I think it really is something that you need to do a gut check on. And if you feel like you need more edits, don't send it out in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll also say it depends on whether, like, let's say you get feedback and it's the difference between a rejection with some details versus an R&R. If it's actually an R&R, if a specific agent wants you to revise, you need to ask if it's exclusive. Because if it is, you can't submit that revised version to other agents anyway. Because essentially the agent is saying, I am giving you my brain space. I'm giving you my ideas. And if you nail it, I don't want you to give this better manuscript with my ideas to a competitor who will then make $1 million off you. So there are situations like that where, and the exclusive isn't forever. It could be, you can't send this to any other agents for 4 weeks.
Yeah, you have to give it in first.
So, and in that case, you just have 2 different versions of the manuscript out and you see what happens. So another kind of querying / word, like, we're going to talk about word counts because word counts are fun for YA. Is 80,000 words the cutoff for your first YA novel? Can you go to 85,000 and 90,000? Would that turn off agents? No, depending on your genre.
Right.
We're all speculative writers, SFF, so we can go longer, or like contemporary thrillers can also go a little longer. Like a sweet contemporary, if it's 90,000 words, we're going to go like, wait. But like we'll see if my editor lets me. My thriller is at 90,000 words right now.
I think Last Girls is a little over 90 something, and
but you need more world building to do. Like world building tends to justify more words.
Yeah, and that one also is it's a dual POV, so I think that added word count a little bit. But the first book I wrote, the fantasy, was 120 something. That one was a little bit longer. That's a lot more world building too. So I think I'm always amazed by authors that can write a 78,000 word book, and it's just it's so tight. Everything is just, every single word is so perfectly chosen, and I would love to get there, but I write long books. I write long books, and it hasn't actually been a problem for me. So I don't know. I don't like the idea of being like, oh, just it has to be this number of words, and then you cut a story that's actually important just to fit a number.
Yeah.
I queried Tarnished at 85K. And it ended up being closer to 95K by the time it published. So that's not any sort of bad space. I think you start to get into trouble when you get over 100K.
Yeah.
Mostly because, and like, just as someone who was reading the slush for a long time, I would see a book that was over 100K and immediately just like sigh. It's one of those moments where you look at it and just go, oh, that's going to be a long one to read. And it might be brilliant. Yeah. But just your initial reaction to that is going to be, oh, God. When it's published, no one's looking at word counts. They're looking at word count. And people like long books. So it's not a problem because it's gone through a vetting process. It's gone through an editing process. But when you're reading for an agent, you're reading query letters, you see 100K and you just want to like lie down. But on the flip side, if you see a book like come through, say I see a fantasy that comes through and it's like 55,000 words, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
However, I will say there was a book that was somewhere around, I think, 60K, high fantasy, and it went through the slush pile. I requested it. I read it. I thought it was brilliant. The agent signed it, sold it for like a lot of money. It's coming out this year. It's amazing. And that can
now we're all like
are outliers. It's really good.
There are outliers. You almost have to like earn your outlier status by obviously nailing it, but also it's a gamble of, are you going to get past the slush reader or the agent whose first reaction is a red flag?
And I think that could be, you know, part of the package is a lot of those authors who are outliers, they struggle in the query trenches. They don't get a lot of requests, or they might not get a lot of offers. They might only get one offer, and it's that agent is taking a gamble because they see the talent, but they know that word count is going to be a struggle. So, you know, it is something like that where you just kind of have to we have to be willing to take the risk, and you have to be aware that it is a risk and that it might not pay off.
And it's an editable problem.
Yeah.
Long word count. That's an editable problem, which, you know, if the voice isn't there right out, you know, and the story is long, I think that's worse. But if the voice is there and it's you know, it's hooking you in and whatever, and it's long, you can always cut words. I think it's harder to add words than it is sometimes to cut them. So don't be discouraged is actually, I think, what the overall opinion is for that.
So this is a perfect question for all of us, especially you, Demetra, but I think all of us have things in our sci-fi that hits this. How do you deal with accidental relevance when you've written a book?
Why did you have to ask that?
That is
terrible. I wrote this book a year and a half ago. I wanted to write a book about sisters who were being raised as doomsday preppers. Some days I wake up and I just sob and I'm like, my God, it feels like I wrote this book from the future. And there's nothing I can do about it. You know, the story isn't about a pandemic. It's about sisters who are preparing for a myriad of ways that the world could end. And we just happen to be in that time right now. And I'm trying to be as sensitive and understanding to the plight of so many people, and you know, I'm scared to go to Costco. I'm scared. I have 2 daughters, and but I also think the book is also about a lot of other things. It's about falconry, and it's about Shakespeare, and it's about the Pacific Northwest and sisterhood, and above all else, when the story is over, it's a story about hope. And I think that's what people will take away from it, and will kind of help it shine a little bit in this awful, awful time.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you have a viral plot in your book.
Yeah. Part of it is just that the tropes of sci-fi are often a little bit apocalyptic, but also I think, especially in dealing with science fiction or speculative fiction that's based in reality, is that it's based in reality. Right. And the possibilities we're exploring are possible. And so inevitably, some of them will happen. Yeah. So, you know, it's very possible. Like, my book deals with heart disease and, you know, punching the healthcare system in the face casually. It's like the themes become relevant now, but in a very kind of dark and weird way that you don't want to capitalize on, and you don't want to be an asshole about it. Right. And so, you know, you find yourselves not wanting to promote in certain ways, or it becomes tricky to do that. But also in a sci-fi world, that's kind of that's the risk that you take. Right?
With sci-fi, you get to explore these things in a nice way, in an unusual way. I mean, my book, I kill off a third of the population in an alien fight, you know, and now all humans live in centers where they're basically going to be farmed in the future. And that's pretty rough, I would say. And I think I make a reference to Trump at one point in the beginning, but after that, that's that. But that said, I didn't do it to, you know, really profit off of this. Right. I did it because I wanted to explore humanity at the worst of times, and I wanted to find hope in a place where you really can't have it.
That's what fiction does.
You know, love and music and books and the things that really bridge people together.
I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think after this, we'll definitely see a lot of that. And I mention president in my book quite often, and I never once say Trump. He just is referred to as POTUS, and it could be any president. Yeah. You pick any president you wanted. I didn't want to put my own extremely liberal beliefs in the book, but because a lot of preppers aren't liberals, so I had to kind of play an even line there. But we're living in really strange political times. It's been going on for years, and I don't see how that can't influence our writing, especially contemporary and sci-fi fiction.
Yeah, I think we're going to see an emergence of, especially in sci-fi, hope punk novels. And I think that's going to be really cool to see. Yeah, I mean, it's a genre already, and there's a lot of really great books out there that are hope punk. But they play on that space of when things are bad, you find hope in it, rather than going down the really dark path of like things are bad and now they're worse and now they're worser. But it really does.
I'm going to start calling my book Hope Punk.
Yeah. I mean, do research, make sure it fits. I obviously haven't read your book yet. It sounds great.
After this, I'm going to be like, does this make sense? Can I like talk about like...
Yeah. There's a lot of hope punk out there, especially in like indie spaces. So there's not a lot in traditional publishing. There's some, but there's a lot more out there in indie spaces. It's happening in queer spaces a lot because people want to read about happy things. It's not terrible things.
I can say though that I can distance myself from politics when I'm writing a book. I can just leave that to the side. But in another way, you really can't. I mean, if I'm writing a Black main character, there's really no way I can't have politics play any kind of role in that story, because that's where we are in society.
Right.
I can't now, like, even if I wanted to do in fantasy, you might be able to get away from that. But when you're doing contemporary, when you're doing sci-fi, you can't really get away from that. You have to still play within that kind of reality. And it's both sad, but it's also great as a writer because you get to explore things in a totally different way, and you get to really have a conversation within it. And that's what I've enjoyed about it.
I will say in fantasy, you can get away with it. Or get away from it, but sometimes you can't. I mean, like, my next book is fantasy election, and it's oh well, that's what we did. So it's how you can choose to dive in a lot deeper, I think, than you can choose to get away. There's more freedom in that, because there is so much that's interconnected with that. So there's really no way to write a book that's apolitical completely. Yeah. You're going to be commenting in one way or another.
And I'll say in this time, like, I think the tricky line is, of course, how to promote, if to promote at all. But also, when things are like this, some people, readers are very different. Some of us, I mean, I'm clearly this person, tend to be more like morbid. And like, it weirdly brings me comfort to read or watch things that kind of let me sink into the feelings. Like, I watched Contagion last week, and I have no regret. I love that movie. And it made me feel better because it's way worse than the movie. But so there will be readers who actually want to read those books right now.
Right.
But then there will be readers who don't and can't. And it's almost like it's walking the line of like almost giving them trigger warnings so that they know what's there without being like, things are bad, buy my book. It's hard. It's just really hard. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to put up a querying question because I love it. Should you query all of your favorite agents first, or sub to half and then see if what their replies critiques are, and then sub? Alechia, you shook head.
No. Don't do that.
Strong opinion. Go.
For me, no. I would say that if you have favorite agents and you really know why they're your favorites, which is worth exploring in a totally different way, then you should create like a spreadsheet of querying within 5 to 8. Put a favorite in there, put some other people in there that you don't know about, get their critique, any of their feedback, use it if it resonates. If it doesn't, move on, and then do another batch. But do not put all of your favorites first, because what if they all say no? And then you're like, oh no, who am I going to query? And this was my favorite agent. So, no.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Same. I also think there's a danger in having favorite agents. Alechia, you kind of hinted at this, but
yes.
I would caution anyone who has a dream agent to rethink that, because what you think your dream agent is probably not actually what your dream agent is.
Yeah.
You don't really know what you need as an author until you have an agent and you're experiencing it. That's why I think so many authors switch agents mid-career, because they find out that the person who they thought was their dream agent is not actually fitting their needs. And it's not necessarily that that agent is bad in any way. It's just that their needs aren't meshing. So like when I first started querying, my dream agent was basically like, can sell my book. I didn't have, yeah. I was like, hopefully,
likes my
yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, that was basically my criteria. And I'm pretty open about this. The agent that I ended up working with was the only agent who offered. She was not someone that I would have queried of my own accord. She requested my book through a contest. And when she requested my book, I thought, wow, is she in for it? Because she didn't represent my genre at all. And I was like, does she just not realize that I'm not a contemporary writer? Like, what's happening? So I thought for sure I was going to get a rejection in like a month, being like, this is lovely. I don't represent the genre. Bye. So when she offered, I was completely blindsided. I'd never really researched her. I didn't really know much about her at all. And when I signed with her, it felt like a risk because I didn't know how she was going to be. She didn't have a lot of clients. For all I knew, she might not even be able to sell my book, and she might not even like me, which would have been a bummer. But it turned out great. And it turned out that she is my dream agent because of a variety of things that I never would have thought of pre-having an agent. So you don't know what you need until you're in it.
Yeah.
I can say I am on my third agent right now, and I started the querying process really books from the Sound of Stars in 2017. So that's a really short time frame, but it's not because I didn't get it along with the other two agents. It's because I realized that what I needed wasn't something that they could provide, and maybe my work in the future wasn't something they wanted to represent. So that's really where it went from there. My third agent is like my absolute dream. And I did not know how much I needed that until I started working with her. So for me, it's like you don't really know what you need until you're in it. And then you go, oh, okay, I need somebody who's a little more editorial, or maybe I need someone who has a vision right away, or who can write things in the margins for me. I need somebody who does that, maybe, So sometimes it's really just finding what you need.
There's also different kinds of agents. Like I have an agent who she's a career agent. So she's looking out for how my career is, how we're going to do this long term. She knows, she's seen all my pitches. She has all my ideas. But I do have other writer friends who have agents that are just book by book. Yeah. So if they don't like your next book, they just say, I don't want to rep this book, and I don't want to sell it. And so that was never something that I wanted. I always wanted somebody who saw that I wanted a long time career in writing and could guide me through that process.
Yeah. I think there's also something to be said for what happens after the deal. And I think this is something we don't really talk about a lot, because I think most authors don't know what they need after they get the book deal. And so then they have a book deal, but they don't know what kind of support they should be expecting from their agent. So a lot of authors don't get enough support from their agent, or their agent might be too in the middle of it. There's a balance that needs to be hit there, and it needs to be something that's right for the author. So if your agent isn't supporting you, if your editor's walking all over you and your agent's just not there to do anything about it, even after you tell them, hey, this is happening, is there something we should be doing about it? And the agent's like, nah, just let it happen. That's a problem.
An agent has to be good at a lot of things. And some people, exactly, anyone can sell a book who can sell a book. Obviously not every agent can sell a book, but anyone can technically sell a book. Then what? And exactly, maybe they have no backbone, and they're afraid of your editor, or they value their relationship with your editor and the publisher more than they value you, because they're prioritizing, I want to sell another client's book here. Like, if this person washes out, fine. And also, I think the true test of the mettle of an agent and your relationship is, how do they respond when you don't break out? When things aren't amazing and perfect when maybe you don't end up lead title, or your book comes out and the sales aren't strong, the publisher doesn't want to buy the option, does that agent start ghosting you? Do they start pushing you in your career in a direction that you're not comfortable with? Or do they like stick by your side and fight to the death to like help you out? Like, I personally think I've seen a lot of different things that I can't talk about out of school, but I personally, I mean, same thing. My agent became my dream agent. She's perfect for me because she's everything that I need. Also because like she'll text me and like answer all my stupid questions. So, which I appreciate. She lets me be
really good. Just to like, there's not a whole lot you can do to predict how an agent's going to be, but there are a couple of things that you can do just to take a look at. None of them are for sure like big red flags. They're kind of more like yellow flags. So in my experience, agents who prioritize their relationship to an editor over their relationship with the author often only sell to one house. And that's why they're prioritizing it, because they only sell to one publisher or one editor, and that relationship is the only way they have to sell books. They have been unable to sell books anywhere else. So take a look at their sales on Publishers Marketplace. It's not a bad thing if an agent is selling to the same editor over and over again, because it might just be that they have similar taste. However, take a look to see if they're selling anywhere else, because if they're only selling books to one imprint and that's it, and they have, 20 sales, but it's all to the same editor, that could be a flag that's saying they don't have the connections or ability to sell your book anywhere else. And they
what
might
if the editor leaves?
Exactly.
Right.
And that's really dangerous. The other thing I really recommend doing, and this is like kind of a weird hack, but if you do get an offer from an agent, talk to their clients, but request a phone call with their clients. Agents or clients, including myself, if anyone gets an offer from my agent, call me. But we're much more forthcoming over the phone than we are in an email. And part of that is because an email has a paper trail. And like, if you say something bad about your agent in an email, there's a higher chance that your agent is going to then see that someday. But that for me really helped, because you know that what they're saying is genuine. If you know people who used to be represented by that agent, try to talk to them, because they'll tell you what went wrong. They might not tell you all of what went wrong, but they might be able to tell you if it was just, it just wasn't a good fit situation. Or if it was, they started ghosting me after 2 months and never replied to my emails kind of a situation. And you can find out what these problems were. Not all problems are going to be problems for every client, but they can be little yellow flags. And if there are enough of them, then it might be a red flag.
I think there's a power dynamic problem within the culture of this industry. When you're looking into an agent and you ask people questions, a lot of the time you're not going to get honest answers, because they're all afraid if they say something that someone's going to tell someone, and next thing they know, they're not selling a book or something. And I don't know where exactly this fear really necessarily comes from, but it's like, I don't know. There's something needs to change within the industry, because this is your career. This is professional. And we need to be able to be upfront and honest with other people when they're asking a question about like, why aren't you with this agent? Or why do you love this agent? And you want to be able to talk about it. And it's, I don't know, that's another topic altogether, but it is something that I think, we all need to be a little more transparent with how we feel. And, it doesn't have to be petty, and it doesn't have to be, unprofessional. It just needs to be upfront. And I would appreciate it. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah, big agree.
Agree. Okay, I need a bathroom break. So I'm going to throw out a topic that y'all can talk about while I'm gone. So I got to find one.
Okay.
It'll only be like a minute, because this is a 3-hour stream, y'all. For me.
For you.
Sorry. And then of course I don't have a question ready. Maybe, actually, I'll just throw it out to you. I had this submitted ahead of time. Can you guys give advice to young writers, like teen writers / new writers, like beginners? Like, what's your go-to advice for people who are just really at the beginning of their journey and they're struggling? So I will be back. So
Well, I was a teen writer. I wrote my first book in high school. And I think my best advice, there's two things that I would throw out there. The first thing is finish something. I don't care if it's bad. I don't care if it's short. Finish something. And that's mostly because you need to be able to prove to yourself that you can do that. I finished my first longer piece of work. It wasn't that long. It was probably like 50 pages. But I did that in 7th grade, and having finished it was a really powerful feeling, and it made me believe that I could do it again.
Yeah, I love that.
So.
And I'm going to pile on that one because finishing something and also writing a book that's really just for you. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself that I have to write this book this specific way. It's going to get me an agent. It's going to get me a book deal. I'm going to get a movie deal and this and that and all this stuff. Like, just write with abandon in the beginning. And I feel like once we start to put that expectation on ourselves, like the sale expectation, it can kind of clog up the creative pipes. And one of my favorite books, and I don't think it will ever sell, I'm not sure. It is a genre that I don't even actually want to go in long term, but I wrote it just for myself, and it's one of my favorite stories because I was in it. I was 100% in it without thinking about whether or not it would sell. It was a book I took a break from writing YA. I just needed to clear my headspace, and I enjoyed that story probably more than any other book I've written.
I'm going to say advice that Rosiee once said, and I think people were, I think you said it, and I think Kat Scully also said this too. It's just read other books, read as much as you can, read, just see what you want to do, see what makes you happy to read, and what you think would make you happy to write, right? And from there, just write without abandon, write whatever, and finish it, because finishing does give you a big spike in confidence. And then also finding people who also like to write or would be interested in writing. I think just knowing other people who are interested in writing and kind of creating a small community can really be a good way to deal with the struggles, but also give you ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sounded great.
We did it.
I agree. Read, write, take the pressure off, do what you enjoy. And actually, Demetra, because you're new, we already figured out we're all plantsers. Are you a pantser or an outliner?
Ooh, I'm a hardcore outliner.
Okay, we got one.
Yeah. Yep, I am.
This next question is perfect. Well, you can answer it from an outlining perspective, and then the 3 plantsers will tell this person that they might be a pantser. How do you stick with a book once you've outlined it? She's finished outlining a book and she feels bored with the outline, the story, and doesn't want to start it. A new idea seems exciting. New idea syndrome as an outliner. So you can go first, Demetra, and then the plantsers will come in with some answers.
I don't know, maybe I am a plantser. I have to know the ending of the story. That's really important to me. I feel like if I don't know, or at least have an idea of how I want the book to end, it's like driving somewhere I have never been without a map. So I can't do that. I'm pretty type A. Even though I have an art degree and I've been an artist for my entire adult life, I still am a planner in most things, even when I'm painting or knitting or I'm looking at the pattern, right? So I think that you can outline without being so stringent. Like, you don't have to get down all the way to the detail, like the scene by scene detail, but the beats and like the turning points and stuff like that. And the story will take its own turn, especially in the middle. And sometimes the ending will change a little bit. But for me, I just need that roadmap. So my advice there is to just not be so strict about the outline. It doesn't have to be a 30-page outline, and then you're just like, well, it's basically a novella. I already wrote it. And, 10 pages, I think, if you can get an outline that's 3 pages, that would be even better, because then your creativity is freed up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the time of pantsers now.
Yeah. I will give a plantser answer, which rhymed, and I hate that for myself.
You are fun.
I like it.
Like a rhyme.
No, I actually love it for myself. I just, it's a love-hate relationship. me and puns. And by which I mean I love them and everyone hates me for loving them. But for me, when I outline, I do it part by part. So I don't commit myself to a full outline at the very beginning. And I think that's what helps me stay excited about the idea and not get distracted, is I only outline one act at a time. So I outline act 1 and then I write act 1. And then I outline the first half of act 2 and then I write act 2. And it's because for me, the biggest part of the pantsing part for me is character development. I know the main arc that I want my character to follow and where I want them to end and where I'm starting them, but sometimes how they get there is different. The emotional reactions they're having to events are not exactly what I expect. And so the place where I end act 1 may not be exactly how I envisioned it when I first outlined it. So I outline act 1, write it, and kind of allow myself the flexibility to stray, as long as I'm not straying too far. And that for me allows me to stay excited about the idea because I'm not working with such a rigid structure and I'm not just executing a plan. I'm actually getting to engage with it in ways that I didn't expect. So that's what works for me. I definitely am more on the planner side of Plancer, but I do like to kind of weave in and out of that space.
For me, outlining is not really my jam. When I do proposals, I do the synopsis, and that's fine as long as there's like a sentence per chapter. That's usually my mindset, is 1 to 2 sentences per chapter of what's going to happen. But I don't really go into details. And that seems to work for a synopsis. But if I don't really, I won't write an outline unless I really need to. I just want to write it and see scenes that I really want to write and then work towards writing them. And that's how I basically stay excited the entire time I write a book. I don't know how to lose interest because I'm so like single-minded, narrow-minded on this one like story and what I want to have happen, and I can't wait to see what happens and how I get to explore this character, So I think losing a bit of the rigidity helps a lot, exactly like Rosiee said. And I think if you don't commit all the way to it, you have an idea of maybe not so vague, but you have an idea, and then you kind of just go with it and see where it flows. If that helps. Maybe I'm more of a pantser. I don't know.
Yeah, the characters always take over anyways, no matter, the best laid plans, right? So the characters always kind of take over. No matter what you do.
Well, that's what I experienced, and it's funny because I actually used to have a roommate who really, really believed in the like characters take over the story thing, and I just never understood that at all because I was like, I'm in control. What are you talking about? And then I started to like shift over to be a little bit more of a plancer, and I start to experience that in a more it's a more visible way for me. Like I do see that my characters aren't reacting the way that I initially intended them to. But, if you're in a space where you're trying to stick to a really rigid outline and it's not interesting to you, that could be what's going on. But I do want to say that if you're writing a book and it's not holding your interest, it might be the wrong book. Yeah. And it's okay to put a book aside and write something different if you feel really strongly that it's just not your jam.
Yeah. I think if you're bored, and exactly like you said, if you're bored with thinking about your story, then maybe it's not the right story.
Yeah. That being said, if you're bored writing your story because it's the 10th time you've rewritten it, it might still be fine.
All right. Do any of us have a pre-writing ritual? So I guess pre-planning, like before you start writing.
I have to light a candle. I know it's weird.
I like that.
I like that. I've been lighting a lot more candles recently because I'm home a lot more. And also I'm testing my sense of smell to make sure I don't have COVID.
Oh,
so sad. I'm sorry.
I have like a light cough that's probably allergies, but it's still freaking me out. I do have a couple of like things that I always do as part of the writing process. They're not necessarily pre-writing rituals, but I do write to music and I do make a playlist for the book. I will spend hours upon hours building a playlist for the book so that I don't have to write it, which is great procrastination technique. But then I will get sick of that music because I will listen to it on repeat in shuffle for like 2 to 3 years.
Right.
So all of the songs that were on my Tarnished playlist, if I hear them at all, I like start to have a mental breakdown. Because it's sort of a Pavlovian response. I think Kirsten White talks about this a lot, where she picks one song for a book. And then she'll hear that song on the radio and she'll start to have like a reaction of like, oh, I need to work now.
Yep.
But for me, it's just like a big emotional like, oh no, I have to do work and I'm going to stress out because I'm like high anxiety all the time. So
Right.
that's,
I've got another author to add to the stream.
Oh, yay.
Okay.
So I'm going to add Jennieke.
Hey, everybody.
So this is
I'm on the
Jennieke.
top. I made it to the top.
Jennieke, if you'd like to introduce yourself, who you are, and your book. We're currently talking about pre-writing rituals, so like things we have to do to write. We've talked about rituals and stuff, so you can give us yours.
All right. Well, I'm Jennieke Cohen. I am the author of Dangerous Lines, which, hey, there it is.
So pretty.
And
The pros have their books, whereas I'm like, oh.
I had mine and I forgot.
well, because I saw Rosiee do it last weekend.
That's why it's here. I haven't moved it. It's just been sitting here.
Anyway, yeah, so it's a historical young adult novel about a girl who has to get married, and there's she's a Jane Austen fan before Jane Austen fans were a thing, I guess, and yeah, she uses Jane Austen to try and figure out how to navigate the London social season. So there's a mystery. It's fun. I don't know. And yeah, pre-writing. Let's see. Basically, I think I generally have to like sit somewhere where it feels like, I don't know, it's very kind of woo-woo thing to say, but I guess it's like somewhere where it feels comfortable, I guess, and like just like somewhere where I can kind of relax but also get work done. And generally I'll just have like my cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is and then just try to sit and try to write. I don't know. There's nothing that interesting to it, honestly.
I don't have any. I don't have one. I don't know. I just get an idea and the spark, and then I'm like, all right, let's write.
Got a related question, because we mentioned music. Does anyone do playlists for their novels?
Yep.
Yeah, so I do. I don't do playlists for specific characters. I kind of just put it all in one space. So there are definitely songs that are like for specific characters, but it's all in one playlist. But I tend to try to pick a vibe. So it's not just like this song talks about this very specific emotional thing that this character is going through. I'll pick like a genre of music. So for my next book, it's sort of a 1920s vibe. So I've picked swing and blues and jazz as kind of the elements that I want to go with. So I'm listening to a lot of like postmodern jukebox and I'm obsessed with their cover of High Hopes. And yeah, so I'll just pick a lot of stuff that has the right vibe. I tend to really like covers that are done in a different style. So postmodern jukebox is great for this book I'm writing, but I also like I like covers that feel very like spooky, kind of, even when they're like peppy songs, like pop songs. I like it when they shift genres on them. So that's where I tend to go for my music.
Yeah.
I have a playlist for Last Girls on Spotify. It's public. You can go and listen to it. I have one for Dice Mag. It's public. You can go and listen to it. And I'm married to a musician, so I can't. Honestly, it's like part of the process. Like it's the same way that I treat outlining. I have to make a playlist for the book too. But the strange thing about that is I can't write with music. I need like near Arctic silence. So much so that I had earplugs made at an audiologist to block out the sound in my house. Yeah.
Yeah, I generally like. Oh, sorry. You want to go first?
No, you can go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I generally I can only listen to instrumental stuff while I'm writing, if at all. And so sometimes that's movie scores, sometimes that's I don't know, some thematic thing that has to do with the book, sometimes classical, but just sort of depends. And what playlists I can get that are already pre-made on, whatever, Amazon Prime Music or Pandora, whatever. I'm just kind of lazy, so I don't generally make playlists for myself. So
I really like instrumental stuff too, Jennieke. I really like video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
So there's a short story that I have coming out hopefully this year. It's in an anthology that got delayed because of the pandemic. And I wrote that entire short story to one song off of the Dragon Age Inquisition soundtrack. It's the Lost Elf theme, and I just listened to it on loop. So for me, it's just all about getting into a zone, and music creates that zone. So sometimes it's an instrumental song, and sometimes it's peppy songs. It just depends on the vibe, I think.
My one
sorry. With the Sound of Stars, it was pretty easy because the Sound of Stars is there's a playlist within the story. So if you look on Spotify, the Sound of Stars has a playlist, and each song is actually a chapter heading. So it basically will tell you the vibe of the chapter. And then whenever I was in that chapter, I would play that song. So
that was one of my favorite things about Sound of Stars. I thought that was so cool and such a great way to create a touchstone for the reader of not only what's the music that's being listened to by these characters, but what vibe do you want to give in the chapter? It had a really cool way to analyze what's happening, and I can totally see readers in a class having to listen to the song and then read the chapter and talk about the themes that cross over.
I'm hoping to imbue it in there, and do a really good job with that. But it was easy because when you have a character who really is interested in human music and what they're going to listen to at the end of the world for humanity, it's kind of easy to kind of pick those songs that people would be saving and just kind of go from there, but also make sure that it's the feelings are there for what's going on in the chapter. But actually, I thought it was just the one book, but all of my books are about music. And I just wrote a foodie fantasy that's all Stevie Wonder, all of his greatest hits. And then I wrote another one where it's Taylor Swift. And it's always within, I don't know why I do it, but music is really important to me, so I understand.
I usually can't write with pop music, except for some reason on The Stars We Steal, I listened to It Must Have Been Love by Roxette on repeat. So I referenced it in the book.
That's such a
good song. All right, we actually, because Psychic, got a question that was going to be the next topic I was going to talk about. Debuting advice. I want to talk about debuting because we've all done it, some more recently than others, and we can also talk about this specific time. I think debuting in this time is something. It's really something. But just generally, I would love to talk about debut culture, debut advice. Yeah. And Demetra, you and I can talk about second books, which is a whole other hellscape. So, yeah. Let's start with the one thing you wish you'd known before you debuted. Or advice you to yourself.
I talked about this on Twitter a little bit recently. I wish that I had known what normal sales numbers are for a debut, because the only numbers we ever hear about are the outliers. We hear about these massive book sales. We hear about people who are hitting the New York Times bestseller list and they sell 5,000 copies their first week. And that's the only thing that we have to base our success off of. And that's a really dangerous game to play because most people don't hit the New York Times bestseller list. Most people don't sell thousands of copies in their first week, let alone any week that they're publishing. There's this weird myth, I feel like, that's out there about how many books you sell as a traditional published author. Because I have friends who are indie published, and the amount of books that they sell versus the amount of books that I sell is not, it's different. I do sell more, but I don't sell astronomically more. It's not thousands of copies that I'm selling versus their, 12. I'm selling a couple thousand copies versus their, 1,000 copies or something like that. It is very different than what I expected as far as sales numbers go, just because no one talks about it. So I think it's really good to connect with your fellow debuts who are in the same genre as you, but also the same, this is going to sound like really terrible, but the same like debut tier. I don't really know how to explain this, but there are books that you just know are going to be pushed. There are books that you know are going to be successful. They're going to hit the New York Times bestseller list. Comparing with them is the recipe for disaster. But comparing with your fellow debuts who are slated to be more mid-list, I think is a good thing to do, because then you get a gauge of what's normal and you don't think that you're a huge failure when in fact you're actually doing just fine.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, Rosie. I think like sometimes it's tough to know. I mean, it's obvious and to some extent, like who they're pushing and who they're not. Yeah. But like sometimes I was pushed to the end of last year. I know you were October. Like I was the end. I was December, and so it was like I got to see everybody's kind of, everyone in the debut group. I got to see all their experiences, and so it was like almost like I had too much information in a way. So like you compare yourself that way because you've just been observing stuff. But then, I don't know. I would say like it's definitely helpful to talk to the people who you think either are in your genre or like are somewhat close to you and in that sphere that you were talking about. But beyond that, like my experience, I would say something important is to remember to do your marketing early. Like even if your publisher's not doing it, I would like say you should start early, and whatever that means for you and your budget, your marketing budget. Like I think Alexa, isn't the accepted wisdom is to do like 10% of your advance, right?
10 to 15, but it really depends on your advance and your book. Yeah, like that's how much you should save just in case is the
sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, you should have something put aside, right? And like, I think if you get a feeling that your publisher's not doing something or not doing what you want, like you should definitely try and do it yourself if you can, or connect with people who maybe know how to do that. Whatever it is, if it's a pre-order campaign, if it's I don't know, like if it's ads in a specific place that you really love, I don't know. But I do think you shouldn't hope that your publisher is going to do something, because generally they may not, to be honest.
Marketing.
I agree.
I debuted last month. I don't know. Ooh, that was a lot of stuff.
I was going to say March feels like it's been a whole year long. So I was like, that can't be right.
Yeah.
We said that in January. Remember, everybody was like, why is it still January? And now we're like, why is it still March?
Yeah. And debuting at this time has not been a joy, as you'd expect. I mean, you feel guilty feeling bad about it for yourself, because the world is chaotic at the moment and everybody's trying to make sense of what's going on. That said, it's also a big hit to what you were hoping to experience, what your dream was to debut at this time, and not being able to do launches, not being able to hopefully charm people and be like, hey, please buy my book. It has changed things. And I mean, I sent out a lot for a pre-order campaign, and I did as much as I could and giveaways, and and it's really fun for me anyway, because I like being online presence, because I live in Germany and I don't get to speak English quite often with people. So that's really nice. That said, debuting now is like, I have no idea what I'm doing. You're supposed to be promoting yourself, but how can you promote yourself when the world is this way, where no one is certain of what's going to happen next, or how long we're going to be isolating, or social distancing? When do we know when that's going to be over? We don't. So, and you can't even say that, you can go pick up my book at a bookstore, because they're not open. and you can't necessarily buy my book on Amazon at some point because they're not shipping books. It's not a necessity. So
I have links down below to everyone's books with indie-bound links, because indies and Barnes & Noble are still shipping books. It's actually the perfect time to not buy physical books on Amazon, because you're right, they're not shipping them. But Barnes & Noble, indie stores, and I assume Book Depository, business as usual, support your authors. I've got links to everyone's books down below. Or ebooks, read ebooks.
A lot of indie bookstores are not only shipping, but they're also allowing for like curbside pickup. Yeah. So you don't have to go in, you don't have to touch anyone. Basically, they're just gonna like wave at you from your car, or at you in your car, and like put the book on the sidewalk, and then you get out of your car and go get it, and you don't have to actually interact with anyone. So
when you debut, you want to be a bit of in the spotlight. Yeah. But you can't be at this time. When before this all happened, though, when you see debut culture, recently in the last few years, you've seen debuts that are getting like 7-figure deals, and you're like, I can't get near that. So what am I doing? And that can really put a lot of pressure on you. And that's a whole new debut culture that I think people are starting to not only question, but also be like, well, how do I compare? Where do I fall? Am I going to be mid-list? Is my publisher going to push me? How do I market myself? And you're looking at, you're going on NetGalley, and you're going on this and that to find out if people are really interested in your book, and people are tagging you in reviews already. And you're like, so debut culture is humongous, and there's a lot of different facets that you can talk about. And at this time, I don't really think any of them are applicable, because we're all in this together. Whether or not we see it, we are all in this together. So I'm hoping
all
to
in this
push
together.
I love that musical.
Sorry, I just like, you're in like this talking very seriously, and I just start singing.
You have to, because if you don't make a joke right now, we'll just be so sad. And Alexa and I, we didn't debut this year, or the end of last year, which is December is a crazy time to debut. I think that, so for Die Smack, I was so just disillusioned. Like, I was so concerned with fairness. Like, I couldn't believe, and this goes back to the agent talk, right? So I'm on my second agent now, but with my first agent, and he was lovely. I was obsessed with fairness. Like, I don't understand. You mean they're not going to like do this thing, or I'm not going to get a pin, or they're not going to make me bookmarks, or they're not going to, and I just, that can really wear you down. And so for this book, I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if whatever would stick. Like, will it stick? Will this work? Will that work? I just tried a bunch of things. I worked myself so hard trying to market Dive Smack that for my launch, I had no voice. I had bronchitis. I could barely speak. And I just, it goes back to that type A thing, right? So I literally drove myself sick to promote the book. And for this one, I kind of like have lists of what I think works and what doesn't. And I also have an agent that says, don't do that. We don't have evidence to support that moves the needle, but here are some other things you can do. Send your arcs out to librarians with a note, or do these like things that are personal, have personal touches. And for this one, I don't feel sick, and it's coming out in a month, and in
fairness, we have second book syndrome, which means we just don't fucking care. Sorry for the
I care because
I care, but like, second book syndrome's so weird because there's no debut push anymore.
Right.
Do I have a book coming out? I don't know. Is the question you ask yourself. It's great. We're just real talk.
That's my big mood right now, because I'm in the middle of getting my second book out.
And that's the thing about post debut. It's okay to feel let down. I actually think it's really normal to feel that letdown. And it's just kind of like, what does forging forward mean? But it's almost a relief, honestly, on subsequent books that you don't have to stress as much because no one's paying attention. It's great. Yeah.
That's a big mood, though, is the crash. after debuting.
It's real.
It's so real. It's like I mean, I had several friends who debuted like before me earlier in the year, and they all warned me, and I just didn't think it was going to happen to me because they were all like,
you don't believe it till it happens.
Well, they were also like big books, and I thought like, well, yeah, because they're getting sent on tour and they're like doing all these big events and they're getting all these interviews and they're doing all these like blog posts. And leading up to my debut, I didn't actually have that much to do, and I felt like, oh my God, no one's going to hear about my book because I'm not doing a bunch of interviews and I'm not doing a bunch of blog posts. But then you go to your launch, if you have a launch party, and it's just completely bonkers. Like the energy, the adrenaline, even if you don't have that many people show up, it's so high. And then the like congrats on Twitter is just, it's wild. It's so hard to keep up with, even if you're a smaller title. And so the crash comes like a week or two after, when you stop getting all that attention and you start to be like, oh my God, I'm irrelevant now. And like to an extent, yeah. And like
let's all lay on the floor like right now.
Yeah, it's big.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, I'll say that like the best cure for that is just really becoming as horizontal as possible. Yeah. Just lay down.
We're youths here. We don't drink. It's fine. Drink responsibly. The legal age in Germany is 16. You're fine.
I would be having wine right now if I wasn't getting some kind of weird sinus infection. You have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, you have to tell yourself, I did a good job. Like if you're waiting for somebody else, if you're waiting for, your team or whatever, to be like, you did a great job marketing your book. Sometimes it'll come and sometimes it won't. And when it does come, it's so nice. It's so lovely. You're like, you know what? I did. I worked really hard. Thank you for noticing. My problem was I was expecting it. I thought that was just, I did a good job. I was going to be told I did a good job, and that doesn't always happen. Be strong enough. You need a hard backbone in this business. Like this business will wear you down, and so you have to know I did everything within my knowledge, power, finances, whatever, to promote this book, and I'm proud of it. And don't feel bad if it's not a bestseller and it's not, hitting all the lists. Those best of lists come out, they break your heart because you're like, well, I have all these great reviews. Why didn't I? Because those people didn't see your book. They never got a copy of your book. They didn't read it. It wasn't on their radar. I don't even know. Rosiee, how many books come out a year in the YA marketplace? Like, do we even know?
A lot.
A lot.
700,
300, 400, maybe 500.
Yeah.
A lot.
Whoa. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
appreciate so much those bloggers and readers who actually take the time and give freely of their time for nothing, for no pay, to tell other people about your book. And they're the best. They really
I
help.
will say that it serves you well as a debut, and I mean at any stage in the publishing journey, to be respectful of the people who are taking the time to do that on the blogger front, and like booktubers, book bloggers, and just people on Twitter who are supporting you, who are recommending your book. It really does. I think not only just like it's good for you and your book, but like it's good for the community that you're building and like the positivity that you're putting out in the world, to be grateful and be respectful of the people who are doing that.
Great.
But not only the bloggers, but the people who are on basically the invisible people behind your book at your publisher. There are so many people who are doing so much work for you that you're never going to talk to.
Yeah.
I've never once had a conversation with my jacket designer, but I mean, I'm obsessed with my book cover. I think they did an incredible job. And I take every opportunity to say so because I want that person to know how much I appreciate the work that they did, even though I don't have their email address. I've never talked to them before at all. But same thing goes for like people who are managing the social media at your publisher, your publicist, people in marketing. It really does benefit you just in general as a person, but also it will benefit your book if you are respectful of their time and respectful of the work that they're doing, because oftentimes it goes unrecognized and they do really an incredible job.
Yeah.
And they are
Copy editors also.
Yeah, they are doing stuff. Like publicity does so much that we don't see, that we don't even hear about. And then you talk to them and you're like, oh, I'll say like, oh, what about this place? Can we send a copy of my book? And she's like, already did it. I already did it. And I'm like, oh, you're my favorite person in publishing because she's working so hard and I don't even know. I have no visibility to all the stuff she does for me all the time. I just say, when I get it, I just thank you because I can't do that stuff. She has those connections.
Also, when you have a good relationship with them, they don't get mad when you go rogue and do your own stuff. I have done that. And it's easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission, which is normally not my MO in life. But when it comes to marketing for books,
I'll agree with that. I think, Demetra, I think you touched on this as well, or maybe it was Jennieke. Start marketing early because your publisher's going to wait to the last minute.
Yeah.
They have other books to promote in other seasons. And even though you're seeing other people getting hyped up 6 months before their book comes out, it's rare. And so if you can do whatever you can to create organic hype, do what you got to do, because sometimes you're going to get to your season and there's going to be a pandemic and no one's heard of your book yet. It's like, if you can get it out there sooner, do it. If you get arcs, use them wisely. I did a lot of giveaways on Twitter and that was great, but I kind of wish I'd saved some to send to authors that I wanted to, connect with and hoped that they would read the book and like it and, want to do something with that, because my publisher was able to send it to some of them, but not all of them. Sometimes there are things that you need to be doing. Keep an eye out for what your publisher is and isn't doing, and then try to fill the gap. So like, for example, Scholastic, my publisher, doesn't put books up on NetGalley, which means that a lot of bloggers don't see my books. Mm-hmm. There are, on the flip side, a lot more teachers and librarians who are seeing my books because they're in the Clubs and Fairs catalog. So trying to fill that gap, I now know going into book 2, I know that the gap that I want to fill is bloggers. I want to make sure that I'm getting that coverage on the internet and that, people who are reading books ahead of time are getting it in their hands. So look at that. Look and see what you didn't get and how you can fill that gap.
I can say that.
I just want to quickly add another person who's going to be debuting in 2021, and we can freak her out / get her advice. And FYI, I think Sandhya had a problem with a storm, which is why that she hasn't appeared. So sadness. But I'm going to add JL to the stream.
Yay!
Here, and let's scare her. I'm kidding. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I've been listening.
I love your hair. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
But actually, you've created a program, a mentorship program, in light of everything going on, because it's all about preparing and helping and reaching out. If you want to talk a bit about that, what you're doing with the 2021s and the 2020s.
That's incredible, by the way.
I didn't create it. I didn't create it. It was very collaborative. One of the 21 debuters posted the idea in our Facebook group, and then a lot of people commented that we really liked the concept. But basically, and so we just kind of all pitched in with ideas and creating spreadsheets and press releases, and we're all sort of all hands on deck. But essentially, the 2021. The 20 Wonders is what we're calling ourselves. We put together a spreadsheet of all the 2020 releases, specifically middle grade and YA. And we're going to buddy up with 1, 2, 3 or more of them and help kind of dig in a bit more intentionally with their marketing efforts, social media boosts, but like live tweet threads while reading, reaching out to, bloggers, calling bookstores and asking them to order it. Like we're going to get sort of in the nitty-gritty, creating TikToks if that's our thing. But just like joining them to celebrate their launch and help boost them. So we're excited.
Can I just say really fast that JL is like the best person in the history of the world, and I love her and with my entire heart.
I do love you. I love you, Alicia. I've been watching fangirling because I love it. I love it so much. We have the same agent, so there's that family love there.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to experiment with a different layout. Hold on. This is all.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm vertical.
I can like this.
I can change.
No, it's just you, Alexa.
Just me. Well, that's no fun for anyone. Hold on. Ah,
Oh, that's good. I like that.
that's fun. Okay. See? Learning.
Is it too bright? I feel like it's too bright. I've
You're a little
closed my
bright.
window.
I feel like I'm in a closet. Like it's
Okay.
all my windows are open. It's so dark.
You just
My
look
windows
very
are closed,
luminous.
and I don't know why there's so much light. So
Glow.
You look kind of angelic. It's really nice, actually.
wow, I don't want to disappoint you. So
Well, also, you plug your book. See?
oh, okay.
Your stuff.
That's so far in the future. You guys are kind of
I
talking
know,
about that. How
but-
it feels so weird to even talk about something like that in the middle of a pandemic. But in theory, I still have a scheduled book to come out in February of 2021. It's called Wings of Ebony, out with Simon & Schuster. And it's about a Black teen from the hood who learns, gosh, I haven't done a short pitch in a while, but it's about a Black teen from the hood who learns, my brain is in copy edit mode. Sorry, guys. So it's about a Black teen from the hood who discovers racist gods poisoning her neighborhood with violence, drugs, and crime. And she has to embrace her half god heritage to come into her power to destroy them. So
It sounds like it's going to be really good. I'm excited.
I'm sorry.
The title?
The title is Wings of Ebony. It's a duology. So that's part 1.
Exciting.
It's a really
I hate
good
doing short pitches too. I don't know who else hates doing that, but
I feel like
do.
I have it written down somewhere. Had I just looked
All right.
at it,
I can't tell if it's just my internet that's having problems or if it's everyone.
It's just
I
you.
can still hear.
Yeah, I think it's just you.
Maybe it's too many people. Like, do you want me to cut out?
Don't leave.
Hold on.
I can.
I think it's just
everybody
Alexa because she's kind of moving fuzzy.
She is
Who
bored.
knows? Hold
Yeah,
on,
she
let
looks
me
fuzzy to me too. But JL also looks like
just in
horizontal to me. I don't know anyone else.
You know,
that being-
that's right.
Oh, okay.
I like
Are we
horizontal.
back? Okay, it was just like a brief. Who knows? It was probably me. Who knows? Maybe everyone's.
Yeah,
streaming.
your video quality, Alexa, went way down, but everyone else looks normal to me.
All right.
I'm doing this from my phone, and I don't have my glasses on, so you guys are like this big. But I have my laptop, so in case I need to see something larger.
I'm looking for a good question.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we could still talk about debut stuff.
Like you could
No, please.
like we could spend all day talking about that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, so
I was gonna say that could be its own live stream.
I
yeah.
mean, seriously.
And I would do it all from a laying down position.
Yeah.
I've been
I
laughing.
would drink
listening
my
to you
wine and
guys.
cry at the same time.
And chocolate. Yeah, wine and chocolate.
I mean,
All
I
right, well,
think
I
some
gotta-
people.
Sorry, I got a good general question. This is good for everyone, no matter what we write. Editing advice.
Oh god, yeah. Just
loves
avoid it
editing?
at all costs. Okay. I actually like it.
I also like it. I say as I'm about to start editing my book, and I'm just not sure that I still like it. It's like that saying is like you always like what you're not doing, or you always
Yeah.
want what you don't have. It's kind of like that. Like when I'm drafting a book, I'm like, drafting's the worst. Everything's terrible. I hate drafting a book. I just wish it was fun. And then I'll be editing a book, and I'm like, I just want to write a new book. This is too hard.
Yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree.
I think taking you get that deadline with the edits at the same time, and that can create an instant panic. And I think if you it's okay, and I recommend taking a day or two to just let those notes kind of sink in, because it's so easy to, you did all this work and you're like, I got to change that. Like, why do I have to change that? But if you just relax with it, you'll see like, oh, okay, the solutions start to come to you. I made that mistake with Dive Smack because I just like jumped right into the edit, and with Last Girls, I sat with it for a couple of days. I knew the process already, so it wasn't as scary for me. But like once I sat with the notes, I didn't feel as like panicky while I was doing the edit. I didn't let the deadline, hold me back.
On the flip side, I'm a big fan of deadlines because they force you to actually do the work. And obviously, like, I say I'm a big fan of deadlines as I'm on deadline and going to go curse my deadline in like an hour. But I think if you don't have a deadline, an official deadline, like if you're not writing for your agent or your editor or something like that, setting yourself a arbitrary deadline is really helpful. And not just for the drafting process, but also for the editing process, because it forces you to consider how much work you have to do and really take stock of all the things that you're trying to do with this revision. If you just set out to edit a book and you don't really know what you're doing and you haven't set yourself a timeline or anything like that, it's really easy to get lost in one specific thing and just not pay attention to the other things you wanted to edit. So setting yourself a deadline and also then breaking it down into what you want to get out of the edit. So if you're not in a position where you're getting an edit letter from an agent or an editor, write yourself an edit letter based on the things that you know you want to change. This can be as simple as just a checklist, or it can be as complicated as, you know, an actually written out edit letter written to yourself, depending on what your needs are. But I'm a really big fan of tracking spreadsheets or like pacemaker.press that'll allow you to track like how many chapters you're doing, just so you get a visual of what you're actually doing.
I think something to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Another author gave me a revision template. So what I do when I finish a book is I write a chapter by chapter analysis of what happens. And then I go through what changes are going to be made. And then I do like a character analysis as well. And then when I get my edit letter, I move each note that is going to be changed in which chapter. And I put that there within these little boxes, and it sounds really organized, and it is organized. So that way when I get it done, I can just check it off and go on. And that takes me as however long, and I get it by deadline and I'm done. So I make sure I get all of the notes done, but I also do take the 2 days, like Demetra said, where I take 2 days to just let it sink in, because my gut reaction is, oh no, they hated it. So I'm glad like that helps.
I was just going to say that I think editing is where the magic happens. I was listening in earlier over the past couple hours, and I agree so much, or I can resonate with your experience, Rosie. My book, from like the first draft that I finished in about a month to the draft that's actually going to make it to a bookstore, are so vastly different, because I did revise it so many times. And even though I had to change it so many times, each time I think the story got stronger and stronger. And I think some of that is like, sometimes you're exploring your idea, and sometimes you're trying to get to the heart of what you want the book to be about. Sometimes you're trying to, for me, my first like heavy revision, which ended up being almost a full rewrite. I mean, I kept things, but I kept like themes and like broad strokes. But my biggest edit was like completely changing my magic system. And that required me to really honestly dig in deeper. Like, the part of my book that I loved at that phase was my main character. I really loved my main character. But at the time, the type of world building that I used in my story, that was sort of peripheral, but still was inhibiting it on sub. Like, it just was not something that acquisitions departments were pursuing at that time. And a lot of writers, I think, don't know about that kind of stuff. I certainly didn't. And it surprised me, but I was able to revise my story, remove those peripheral elements, and still keep the story, the character central and thematically the same. And through that process on draft 17 now, it is by far a much stronger product than it was when I first started. And so I think for editing, be open to it sort of being this continuous process, understanding that like with each edit, the goal is to get a stronger draft. And remember, something simple to remember is that the old draft that you love and don't want to change, you can still save it on your computer. It doesn't have to go anywhere. So you're just sort of, it feels very final when you're like, oh no, I'm changing all these things. But if you get, a month in and it's a mess and you hate where you're going, you still have the draft that was untouched. So
make sure to save your drafts as different files.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what everyone has been saying, but I would say if you're editing without a deadline, and if you're before you're published or, about to be published, I think it's important to set stuff aside for longer than a couple days. I would say set it aside for, I don't know, a month at least, maybe longer, depending on how you work. But I found, like Dangerous Alliance went through many, many, many edits through many years. And I always benefited most from the times when I would spend a lot of time in between and like work on other stuff and come back. And then getting feedback from other people is, obviously is going to be extremely helpful before you have a professional editor helping you, or, CPs, of course, are always helpful, but in any stage, I'd say. But yeah, I don't know. I think just setting stuff aside for as long as you possibly can, even if you're on deadline, I would say, like, I think, the longer you have in between each draft, like, for me, it's much more helpful. I don't know how you guys feel.
I agree.
It's painful to wait, but it's worth it. So this next question kind of dovetails back into the debut conversation. The gist of it is, like, how much marketing should you do before you get a publisher? So you're getting a book deal. Should you be building a platform before you've even written a book? I would love to talk about building social media presence platform. How far ahead do you do things? When did you do things? And kind of your feelings about that. Because I think this freaks a lot of writers out. And I think it's interesting to discuss. So how far out did we start our quote unquote platform?
Okay, I'll jump in. I jumped on Twitter and I joined Twitter, which is where most of my platform is, when I started writing to pursue publication. Meg Latour posted a video on Instagram, and I remember messaging her and saying, I think I'm thinking about writing a book. Like, what do I do? How do I get connected? And she said, Twitter is where most of the writing community is. And so I joined Twitter, not for the purposes of building a platform per se, but to connect with other writers, to get involved in the community and learn. And like within my first week, I had offered to like beta read something. I didn't even know what a beta read was the week prior. So it was me sort of learning the jargon and learning the industry. And I think the byproduct of that was connecting with people and building a platform. I didn't intentionally start thinking about my brand and my platform until I had put together a book that I knew I was going to seriously query. And I don't think of my building a platform as more of a super intentional thing. Personally, for me, I think, at least this is just my take, but for what works for me, because I don't have the sort of, research and methodical insight to know how to like scientifically build a platform. So my approach, which just seems to be working, is just to really be myself in the writing community on Twitter and just connect with people, and just be a genuine support, whether it's beta reading or offering advice or answering questions. If I happen to answer something, asking questions during the Ask Agents sessions, where agents will come on and answer questions, just participating and being present. I joke with my family that Twitter is my office. And so there are times where I have to like go to work and I have to go like spend time with my Twitter family, connecting and talking and answering questions and DMing and just engaging in that space. And I think the more you can bring sort of an authenticity in terms of like who you are, then also like authentic engagement, like you're there for a purpose, building a platform can be less daunting because you're really just, you're learning, you're growing, you're connecting with the industry that you want to be a part of. And I realize some people find social media just overwhelming in general. And so I don't think someone should feel pressured to do that. But I do think if you're going to pursue creating a platform, doing it in as authentic a way as possible is more effective.
I think it's really important to think about branding and building community as connected but different. Like you said, a big part, I think, for everyone of essentially building a platform is just being a part of the community. And what that does is it's not so much platform building as it is connection building. You're building these connections between you and other authors, or you and agents, or just the community in general, understanding what the norms are, understanding the social expectations of that community. And that branding is more on the sides of platform building, and that it's dangerous to start platform building or branding before you have a sense of where you're going to fall in the world of publishing. So just because you've written a book doesn't mean that book's going to get published. It doesn't mean that you're going to end up writing another book in that same genre that's going to get published. You might start out by writing fantasy and end up writing a thriller. And if you brand too heavily one way, you're going to have to pivot down the road. So I think building that community is really the important part before you have a book deal, and to not worry about the branding and platform so much until after, because you don't really know where you're going to fall in that world. On the flip side, having a platform for something else can be a stepping stone to publishing. And we see a lot of booktubers get published as part of their platform, or we see people who are on Instagram who have hundreds of thousands of followers get published. And part of that is that they have a platform, and it might be that they're writing nonfiction about something that they're an expert in, and that's why they have so many followers. Platform building as a stepping stone to publication is not a requirement. So you shouldn't feel like you have to get a YouTube channel or a Twitter before you get published. That's not a requirement, but it is something that you can do to engage with the community around you. And I think that part is really valuable.
Yeah, I just think you have to be very wary of being too try hard or calculated, because it can also be a huge turnoff. Like something that I've definitely seen where listen, advice as a platform is a thing, obviously. But you have to be careful when you do that. Like, because at a certain point, what advice can you really give? So meaning I've seen very young writers, young in terms of career age, not literal age, going really hard at that as a platform when they haven't even queried a book. And that can actually work against you, is what I'm saying, because when that's aggressively what you're trying to make your platform, you're not going to be sticky at that point, and you'll lose people before you could possibly, they won't come back, is my point. So be very cognizant of what you're doing and when, because exactly, you don't actually know what's going to end up working out for you. Yeah. Just be a person, an organic human on the internet, your community, and then worry. Like, I didn't even have an author website till I got an agent. I didn't start this channel till I had a book deal. So yeah.
I'm the same.
Yay, platform.
I joined Twitter in like 2009 because I was a pastry chef, one, and then two, a young adult librarian. So I was like, this is the hip spot where kids are hanging, you know? I was like, I'm gonna get on here and find stuff out. Didn't really use it. Then I came back when I was working in Brooklyn Public Library, because I knew that's what I was supposed to do. And Storytime Underground was on Twitter as well. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna be connected. But then when I started writing, I wanted to join the community. Really, it's about the community. And mostly because I was living in Germany, and I'm still living in Germany, and I have no one to speak English with. And I can, when you're not speaking English, your English really suffers. And then I'm writing books, and I forgot what contractions were. Like, I just totally forgot what they were. So
I had to reteach myself how to write essays after living in Germany in high school. Yeah. I literally forgot how to write one.
Yeah, it's like you just forget stuff. And like words, you used extrapolate earlier, and I was like, extrapolate? Like, that was in my brain where I'm like, that's a totally other language that I really don't understand anymore. So for me, using Twitter and Instagram, and I get to just like be around people and be myself, which I can't be in Germany, because if you smile at people in Germany, they think there's something wrong with you. So they're like, oh, she's not.
I thought it was really weird, the overly American. Yeah, I got some pushback.
Yeah, they don't want you. And you're smiling, and you're like, hey, and they're like, ooh, stay away from that lady. Wow. So I miss being like really bubbly and happy, and I get to do that on Twitter. And all that said, I don't feel like I ever built a platform, and I still don't actually know my brand. I didn't know what I was gonna do until I had my website, and I got to design my website with a designer. And I was like, I would like a black lady reading a book on top of a donut in space.
That is your brand. I was gonna say your brand is absolutely like food
Yes.
Space.
Yeah.
Black.
Yeah.
Yes. That's it.
That sums it up perfectly.
There's nothing.
Right?
I don't really think that's a cohesive brand, but I mean,
No,
I'll
it's
go with it.
fantastic.
It's pretty cool.
And your bookie cookie thing is just genius too.
Yeah, it's
She
really
turns
good.
books into
I just
cookies.
wanted to do it. Like,
Really
it
cool.
feel like
I
desire
just wanna-
behind, like, baking
I
my
just
name.
want to quickly plug. There's a book coming out in like a week that you absolutely have to read. It's called What I Like About You by Marissa Cantor.
Yeah,
It's contemporary, and it's about a girl who does cupcake book blogging. And it's super cute. It's really good. I love it.
Okay, now I
Marissa's
have to do
been
it
my
because-
critique partner for 10 years. So, but it's really, really cute. So
That sounds fantastic.
it
All
feels
right,
like
I'm
we're
gonna throw just like a fun little question. What dead genre do you want to see come back, like books wise? This is like us as readers and writers,
We're gonna say that dystopian.
Yeah.
Dystopian.
right?
We all don't we all want this? Like, doesn't the world want this?
Well, I still also want vampires back. Yeah.
I would like.
I love vampire books.
Yeah.
I want
You.
queer vampires really badly.
That's what's up.
Caleb
what I want.
Berg just wrote one. That's like the Fellow Dark. Yeah,
Mhm.
that looks
Yeah.
good.
I want them to come back in a big way, and I want them to be super duper gay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That makes sense, and
I-
I want that too.
Like, can we just for a second? Who has watched Buffy?
I watched
Everyone,
parts.
basically.
Yeah, my little
Okay.
I'm the only one. Oh my
Okay,
god.
I'm sorry, but
That's
like,
what you have to do now during the pandemic.
yeah, but like, okay, does
time.
Drusilla not just give off like a magic, like just massive sapphic vibe? Like, where are the sapphic vampires?
I
yeah,
kind of wrote one,
I don't know.
I can say, but it's in the foodie fantasy book.
Good.
And- yeah, and I love it.
Make
I
that happen.
need
no.
this.
It's all
Make it
food.
happen.
It's all love and
I
Stevie
need
Wonder.
this. I need black vampires. I need Latina
Yes.
vampires. I need I need.
Gargoyles.
There's so much more. I mean, if you look at fantasy in general, there's a lot that's been done, but it's not been done with POC characters. It's centered in the story. So I think there's a lot more there that I'm hoping publishing can open up to. I'd even say dystopian. I mean, there's
The
just
kinds of dystopian worlds that you can explore if you're writing from a marginalized perspective are very different than if you're writing from a cishet, straight, white, abled character's point of view. That's just it affects different people differently based on the way that they navigate society.
One of my favorite things that Alexa said in one of her videos that I watched forever ago was, just like, you can try to like sneak your favorite stuff in there, like you can kind of, sneak in these things that are like, I feel like
I wrote a dystopian. It's fine.
Yeah, I have a twist of some stuff in my debut as well. So
I have a
I
dystopian.
could go for some time travel. I don't know if anyone likes time. I know it's
for real.
I do.
Love time travel, and I don't. It's just not. No one will bite.
Yeah,
I like Portal Fantasy 2 in middle grade. I think it's just so imaginative and fun. So,
All the books, bring it back.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, so speaking of
situation is making books popular again, which I think is good. I think more people are home and they're reading, and that's made me really happy.
this one is kind of very specifically for Rosiee, but anyone else can jump in because, I mean, multiple of us write romance, and I think romance really scales, but this is specifically about sexual tension, sex being vital to a romance novel. And actually, because we're YA, even those of us who do write romance, Rosiee, you can answer this from an Arrow Ace perspective, but like YA, there's no sex in my books, even though they have romance. And so basically talk about the dynamics of romance and sex and sexual tension. Rosiee, you want to, you've been itching.
Yeah, so I'm aromantic asexual, which means that I do not experience sexual attraction or romantic attraction. I am one of many people who identify as ace or aro. And so there's a lot of different ways to exist in that space. Some of us like sex, some of us don't. Some of us want a romantic relationship, some of us don't. And I think that we need the variety of representation. There is, I'm not going to lie, there's absolutely a pressure in publishing to make your books about romance. If I could count the amount of times I see on the internet or hear from editors or publishers, it's got to have a romance in it. It just has to. Otherwise, I don't like it. It's really frustrating because my life exists without romance, and I have a very interesting life. I experience conflict. I experience ups and downs. I experience character growth as a person, and I don't need romance in order for that to happen. And so to be told that in a fictional world, in fiction, in books, in movies, that without romance, the story is uninteresting, tells me that I am uninteresting, and that sucks to hear. There's this culture of you must write romance in order to get published. And to an extent, it's true. There are a lot of editors and publishers that won't even touch a book unless there's a romantic subplot. There's a lot of readers who won't. And that is a big bummer. But it's becoming less true. There are more editors out there who are interested in stories that, say, yay, ace writes. My editor's really great about it. There's a lot of editors at Scholastic who are really passionate about putting ace and aromantic stories front and center and making sure that they get the space that they deserve. I know that Alecia's book has a demisexual character in it. And I think 5 years ago, we wouldn't have seen the breadth and diversity of ace and aro experiences that we're seeing now. I keep a list on Goodreads every year of books that are coming out with aromantic and asexual spectrum characters in the kidlit space. So if anyone's interested in that, I'll link it over on Twitter or something. But yeah,
in the comment.
Yeah, I can, or that. There is a lot out there, and I think oftentimes we get sidelined because people think that ace and aro means that there's no interesting relationship, and that's untrue. Platonic relationships can be very interesting. They can have an arc that is very similar to romance. They can have a sweeping feeling to them. They don't have to be siblings in order to be platonic. They don't have to be uninteresting. And I think that's, really important. I think the particular person asking the question was wanting to write a romance that is about an ace character who does not want sex. And I would encourage you to write that. I think the world needs books like that. Know that it is, a tricky marketplace, but that your book is wanted and that there are people who want to read it. Even if you keep hearing from people that all they want is smut or all they want is erotica, there are people out there who want to read about people like them, and those books matter. So write your book. I'm proud of you. Do your thing.
And I also will say, it's easier in YA than maybe in category romance. If you're thinking more like category romance, write it as a women's fiction or just a novel, period. So that you just get away from the genre tropes. But in YA, you do not need any sexual tension or any sex. It's totally okay. Because it's like I said, my romances don't really have it.
So, I will say that
Brightly Burning.
Mine doesn't either. My book
I'll say in YA though that the exploration of sex on the page is becoming more acceptable, and I think that's a good thing. I think sex positivity is positive. It
both.
I mean, it reflects the world, and to ignore it, I think does a disservice to the teens who are reading the books, but also to then sideline asexual people as being, for whatever reason, celibate or stick in the mud or something like that. That doesn't do anyone any favors either. So making sure that there is a wide breadth of representation and the different kinds of relationships that teens have with sex, I think is really important. In adult romance, I'll be honest right now. I'm writing a asexual main character category romance, and it's hard because the world out there doesn't want me to do it, and it sucks. And I'm right there with you. Wow. It's a tricky space to be navigating, and my only advice is just to do it and do your best.
There was a question I really liked that dovetails into this. Let me see if I can find it. If not, I'll just paraphrase it. Sorry. The gist of it, because I can't find it, was the line between how do you, as a writer who is, any of you here who have written own voices, those of you who have done it, the line between writing your own voice's narrative and self-insert, avoiding a self-insert. So if anyone has done that and wants to speak to that kind of line, generally it's tricky to avoid self-inserts in our writing. So if anyone wants to speak to that, they can jump in.
Well, I mean, I wrote I wrote a fat black demi-ace, chronically ill, with anxiety character. So I feel like that was very cleverly me, but at the same time, while I really love that character, she's not me, and we may share a lot of the same identities. I don't. She's not me. Like I can't say that enough. The alien character is more me than the other character. So weirdly, I don't know why, but the thing is, you really have to know your characters going in. Just because they identify as something doesn't mean they're going to be you. What they like, what they experience, who they are because of their experiences. These are things you really need to think about before you're writing your book. But when you're writing your book, what shapes them? What makes them the way they are that is going to have this arc throughout the story? So the line is right at the beginning. You should know that you're not going to insert yourself. You're going to be a totally different person. They're going to have a different name. They may share the same identities, but they are going to be, you need to make sure that they are not you. Like, you need to have their whole idea. Like, you need to just analyze who they are. And I don't know if anybody else can just write a character without thinking about who they are and what they've experienced. But for me, I really need to know my character before I can write them. Otherwise, I don't think I'm the right person to write them.
Totally agree.
All right, here's a really interesting question. Have you ever had an editor who insisted on an edit that you thought would make your book worse? Or CP, let's say editor or CP. So we're not telling tales out of school. Like an edit that, like, fundamentally you just went, I just can't do that.
I mean, I've had like people who were giving me feedback, not my editor, but people who would read the book and just, they give you feedback that you're like, no, it doesn't resonate. Like, I don't think they get the book. And if you get those, then you just have to say to yourself, like, I don't think they get it, or they don't get what I'm trying to do here. But on the other hand, like, also be open-minded and think, do they have a point? And if they do have a point, then, mull over it and see what you can do. But if they really don't, if they're really just like out of left field and you think that edit makes no sense for my book, then you just have to put it in that mental space and discard it, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I think that when it comes to feedback, especially coming from someone who's giving you an idea of what you should do, be really careful, because oftentimes someone will suggest a fix without trying to tell you what the problem is first. And that's really dangerous, because if you just do their fix, you don't know what they're trying to fix, and you need to figure out what the problem is first. So I'm always really suspicious of prescriptive advice. So anything that's telling me how to fix a problem. And I prefer to get advice that is more diagnostic of the issue, or even just someone telling me their reactions, because I think that's a much more effective way for me to process where they're struggling or what they're coming up against that isn't working. And then I, who knows my book better than anyone else, can then brainstorm a solution for it that's going to work for the book in a way that does resonate. So usually if I get feedback like that doesn't resonate, that's asking me to do something that seems just completely bonkers and like not what I would want to do, I'll try to dial it back and like figure out where they're coming from so that I can at least address the issue that they're experiencing it, even if I wouldn't address it the way that they want me to.
That makes sense.
Yeah. We had a question earlier about building suspense. So Demetra, because you write thrillers, I think that'd be good for you. But anyone else who has like good hacks for building organic suspense in your story. Yeah, the question I believe was specifically with regard to horror, but all stories need suspense.
Yeah, I love dark family secrets and horror and thrillers and nail biting stuff. So for me, I think suspense is really about holding back, and I think we do that whenever we write a story, right? We're holding back some of the information. I think it was like Stephen King who said, good stories don't give up their secrets all at once. I think in the thriller and suspense genre, you're kind of dropping a lot of breadcrumbs along the way. You want the reader to kind of try to be figuring out what the twists are gonna be. And hopefully you're writing them in such a way that they're wrong, because that's usually my goal, is to a few red herrings and stuff. But so for me, breadcrumbs are very important. And people asked me once if I plan them out in advance, and I guess I keep saying I'm a plotter, but maybe I'm a planter, because those breadcrumbs kind of came organically as I wrote. Like, oh, if I put this here, I kind of know this is going to happen later. And I drop it, and then I have to make a note to remember it. So for me, that's just dropping those hints and misleading. A lot of, having characters overhear things that they're wrong about and making wrong assumptions. I think that really works for suspense.
I mean, Jane Austen was the master of the misunderstanding. So Jennieke, you had to draw on that for your book.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I did. I guess I did a lot of the same stuff. I planted like people overhearing conversations that, or hearing parts of conversations and then having other stuff happening so they can't hear the whole conversation. And then, a lot of it's built on this misunderstanding, and in some cases they're not misunderstandings. They're literally things that are not good that are happening, and and then you tell someone else and that other person doesn't believe you because they have a certain opinion about that other person. So it's, I think it's a lot of the same stuff, but Austen was great with that stuff, I think. Emma, I think, is one of the best, mystery novels. That's not really, it's like a mystery that you don't really think of as a mystery.
Emma's my favorite.
Did you like did you watch the movie?
I haven't seen the new one. I really, really want to, though, but I haven't seen the new one yet.
Yeah,
but I do love Emma. I think of her as a demi-romantic icon for all my aces in the audience watching.
I think you might get that from the movie. I mean, not get that from the movie.
I mean, it's there. It's there everywhere. Maybe I'll do a reread and a close reading like I did with the Hunger Games.
That'd be fun.
All right, we're at almost 3 hours. I know not everyone has been here the whole time. I should have dragged you all in much earlier to have more talk time, but we should wrap up. And so I want to know what you guys, what you're currently reading, and then you got to end on a plug for your book, and all the links are below for people to buy them. So support authors right now. There was a question about piracy, and I wasn't going to wade into that. Buy books. Thank you. What are we reading? A book. What's a book rec? You don't have to be currently reading it.
I'll start. So this is the book that I read the first one recently. So I missed the wave of reading sci-fi, and I just read it like at the very end of last year with one of my CPs. We read it together and discussed. So I'm jumping into this because supposedly it's a very good sequel, and I am in the process of writing my sequel. So I'm reading lots of sequels. And yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued. The first book was really heavy. Like, I didn't quite know what I was going into. If you haven't, it was a lot. But I was intrigued by the world building. So I'm very curious to see where I'm headed in the second book. We'll see.
That's on my TBR right now.
So book one, did you feel like it was super heavy?
I haven't started it. I got it queued up. I might email you and be like, "What? Tell me on."
You should totally read it. My friend, she was like, "You need to read this. You need to read this." And then the toll came out, and I was like, "Well, I can't just pick up the toll, so I have to start from the beginning." And I read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love books that are mysterious or thrilling or suspenseful. Like, that's my jam. But just the topic itself, when you think about death in that way, it was just really, really, I thought, thought-provoking. So I'm excited to see about how the second one goes.
And your book?
Oh, I'm supposed to plug my book. There's no buy links yet. No buy links yet. No cover I can show you yet. However,
but that probably is soon, right?
Yeah, no, I've seen like, you know, a mock-up of the cover.
Nice.
So there should be details I can share about that literally any day now. But my book is a YA fantasy. It's for for fans of Black Panther, fans of The Hate You Give, and even fans of like Hunger Games. If you like that sort of like underdog book, you will love Wings of Ebony. It's gritty. It's a really even blend of contemporary and fantasy. It is very grounded in the real world, but it has quite a bit of magic to it. And it has really fun voice. So if you love voicey characters, I think from page 1, you'll immediately know, okay, I can dig this. So you can check me out on Twitter. That's the best place you can reach me. Because I don't have links for you to buy yet.
Jennieke, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm actually reading your book right now, Alexa. So, yay, it's fun. I'm enjoying it, which I knew I would. So, The Stars We Steal, people, get it. And let's see. Oh, what else? Oh, something I can recommend is Julie Andrews' latest memoir, which I don't know. I love her and I love her movies, so I listen to. I think I got it on audio, and she actually narrates it, so that's really cool. And I thought it was fun. If you're looking for something else, that's not fiction. And then my book is Dangerous Alliance, historical.
Hold it up again. It's so pretty.
It is.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Demetra.
That's all.
So my ADHD doesn't allow me to read one book at a time. So I'm actually reading, I just started getting into Station 11. I didn't know this when I started reading it, that there was a Shakespeare component and that they were trying to save the arts in that book. And then when I was talking to my publicist, she said, oh, that's how I've been pitching Last Girls as a YA Station 11. So it's
that's a good pitch.
crazy. It's a good pitch. Well, she's awesome. And so I'm reading that. I'm also just finishing Rosiee, and as a first generation bilingual Greek American, I can tell you that my mind, I've just been savoring that book. The writing is beautiful. She's a powerhouse, and I'm writing an adult Greek mythology right now, so that's been very helpful. I'm also reading Edith Wharton's mythology, so I've got 3 going. Last Girls comes out May 5th. This is from 14. It's about 3 sisters who are being raised as doomsday preppers, and when one sister does something that brings unwanted attention to the secret prepper compound where they live, it kicks off the erratic behavior of the compound's leader, and they have to decide whether to stick around, to take off, or to stick around and to defend themselves against the people who are sworn to protect them. So that comes out May 5th.
Nice. Rosiee, we'll go in the Brady.
Okay. Well, I am currently, I'm on an audiobook kick. Basically all of my reading that I get to do is audiobook because I can listen while I work, and then after work I have to work on my book. So there's like no reading time. But I am reading, I don't know if you can see this, Devious on audiobook. And I just want to put a big plug out there for anyone who is shamefully downloading PDFs of authors' books without paying them. That sucks. And you can get books for free through, I think it's called Scribd.
Yeah.
All audiobooks and ebooks, you can just get them for free right now. They're doing a free month of March. You don't have to pay at all. They usually have a month trial anyway. And that way authors actually do get paid. You don't have to pay for the book in order for authors to get paid. You should get books from your library. Most library systems have an ebook or audiobook lending system. The app Libby is incredible. Basically, like, it sucks because we're poor. And I know that like a lot of other people are poor too, but it doesn't help us at all to create more books. And if you want to see more books from us, then you should be paying for them or getting them through a library system that does pay for them. Yeah. Anyway, I'm really enjoying Truly Devious. It's a murder mystery with a historical component. So I'm really enjoying that. And then I'm also reading, in my very spare, not very much time, a couple of arcs. I'm reading You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, which comes out in a couple of months. It's really, really good. It's basically about a girl who has to become prom queen in order to get a scholarship. And she's kind of a misfit, doesn't really jive with the like sense of what popularity is. She's a Black teen growing up in a kind of small town America. So it's really good. Basically, the voice is incredible. Everyone should check it out when it comes out. And then my book, Tarnished Are The Stars. Where did I put it? Oh God, it's backwards. It's a genre blendy sort of sci-fi fantasy. It's got a lot of steampunk elements to it. It's about 3 queer teens who have to save their planet from a epidemic of heart disease. And it's basically for anyone who wishes that Cinder was queer or anyone who wants to kick their health insurance in the face.
Alechia,
and it's got an Arrow Ace character. So.
So me, I am about to start reading. I finished Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, which was adorable, and I loved it. And now I'm about to read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. So that's on my TBR. I have so many books. Like, there's just so many amazing books, and I'm really looking forward to Incendiary by Zoraida Cordova.
Yes.
And oh goodness, there's just so many good books, like Legendborn, Tracy Dion, and I'm just like waiting for all these books to just come out so I can get them. For my book, which is like somewhere behind me somewhere, if you like aliens and you like rebel teenage librarians and you like music, then you may like this book. It's basically about a teenage rebel librarian who pairs up with a music-loving alien to save humanity in the end of times. And it's really, it sounds like it's a dark book, but it's really hopeful. That's all I can say.
I've read it.
Please get it, please.
It's really good.
It's super hopeful. Also, it has a demisexual character. So everyone in the comments talking about Ace stuff, you should check it out.
Yes. I'm last. Okay, I read so many arcs that aren't out forever, and I torture people. So one that's actually out that you can read is The Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. It's legit. It listed for a reason. It's really, really good. It's the best YA thriller I've read in years. And it's distracting. If you need like just like a book to burn through, like I like in a time like this, I'm like, well, I was reading thrillers before, but I like them because like you totally disappear into them and you just go through them really, really fast. So that one's really good. You can get it now. And one that is coming out in a couple of months. I just read His and Hers by Alice Feeney, and it was really good. You just can't read it till August, and I feel terrible, but it's like really juicy. So I guess you could pick up her first one, which is Sometimes I Lie, which is a weird book, but it was good. It's good. And I write books, sure. They are pretty diverting, actually, because they're cheesy sci-fi romances. So Brightly Burning is Jane Eyre in Space. The Stars We Steal is Jane Austen meets The Bachelor. If you just need to like disappear into some UST and some angst for, I know I say that weird, for hours and hours, like at least you're laughing because like in Germany, that's how they would say it. I get some flack. Anyway, that's my books that are out. Sure. It's weird because this is my channel. Like people already know. Like I try not to talk about them that much. So yay.
And she has a really fantastic thriller that is delicious coming out as well.
Later next year.
Yes.
It's very good.
I turned it into my editor last night.
Yay!
Out of my hands. So well, for now, I'm not done. Like there's still to do copy edits and all that stuff. So anyway, thank you for joining us, everyone. This was a lot of fun. Since we're all stuck in our homes, I'll do more live streams. So you might see some of these fine folks again, have them back on. We'll just talk about stuff. And yeah, everyone have a good Saturday. But what is a day? Can we even tell the days apart anymore? I don't know. Yeah.
Not really. I
So,
didn't
thank you so much, everyone. And as always, guys, like happy writing. Bye. Everyone go wave. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Thank